The tent went dead silent the moment Lieutenant Reed laughed. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect, the kind that comes right before everything falls apart. Isaiah Freeman, 75 years old and wearing a bright orange polo shirt that seemed too cheerful for what was about to happen, didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there with his weathered hands clasped behind his back while a decorated Navy SEAL asked him if he knew what a platoon was. The younger officers were grinning, waiting for the old man to stumble over his words. None of them saw the serpent patch on his sleeve. None of them knew they were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their careers. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what happens next will shake you to your core. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Isaiah's story travels. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end of this one. The thing about military arrogance is that it comes in layers. First, there's the fresh boot straight out of basic chest, puffed up with boot camp pride, thinking 8 weeks of push-ups made him invincible. Then there's the seasoned grunt, scarred and cynical, who's seen enough combat to know he doesn't know everything. But the worst kind, the most dangerous kind, is the elite operator who's completed just enough missions to believe his own legend. Lieutenant Marcus Reed was that third kind. At 32 years old, Reed had the resume to back up his swagger. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 successful hostage extractions, a SEAL trident that meant he'd survived Hell Week when 60% of his class had rung the bell. His shoulders carried that achievement like armor, and his eyes held that particular gleam of a man who'd looked death in the face and made death blink first. The problem wasn't what Reed had done. The problem was what he thought it entitled him to. The Naval Special Warfare Training Facility sprawled across 20,000 acres of Nevada desert, a maze of kill houses, rappelling towers, and classified simulation centers that turned America's best into something even better. Today's exercise was different, though. This was Joint Operations Integration Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon Air Force Pararescue, and Navy SEALs all working together on a simulated hostage rescue in a hostile urban environment. The command tent sat at the heart of it all, a climate-controlled cathedral of modern warfare. Holographic displays floated above titanium tables, showing real-time feeds from drones, satellite imagery, and biosensor data from every operator in the field. The technology alone cost more than most small towns' annual budgets. Reed stood at the center of it like a king surveying his kingdom. His team had just completed their run-through in record time, 14 minutes, 32 seconds. Fast enough to save lives. Fast enough to make history. "Someone get that time logged," Reed barked to a young specialist hunched over a laptop. "I want it on every board from here to Coronado." Captain Melissa Torres, the Army Ranger liaison, glanced up from her tactical review. "It was good, Reed. Don't let it go to your head." "Good?" Reed's laugh was sharp. "Torres, we just shaved 90 seconds off your Ranger's best time. That's not good. That's dominant." Torres's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. Everyone in the tent knew Reed's type. The kind who needed to win everything, even conversations. That's when the flap opened. The desert sun flooded in for just a moment, and with it came Isaiah Freeman. Nobody noticed him at first. The old man moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints remembered every fall, every forced march, every night sleeping on frozen ground. His orange polo shirt was crisp despite the heat, tucked neatly into khaki pants that were pressed with the precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime making his bunk passable for inspection. The light brown cap on his head bore no insignia, no unit marker, nothing to announce who he was or why he was there. Just an old man, small-built silver curls, peeking out from under his cap, walking into a space filled with America's most elite warriors. He made it 3 steps before someone noticed. "Sir, this area is restricted," a young corporal said, moving to intercept. His tone was polite but firm, the voice of someone following protocol without knowing why it mattered. Isaiah stopped. His eyes, dark brown and impossibly calm, swept across the tent, taking in the holographic displays, the clusters of operators reviewing footage, the tactical maps spread across every available surface. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost granular, worn smooth by 75 years of use. "Just looking," he said simply. The corporal hesitated. The old man didn't seem threatening, but protocol was protocol. "I'm going to have to ask you to let him be." The voice came from the far corner of the tent. Sergeant First Class David Okonkwo, a hulking Nigerian-American ranger built like a linebacker, waved a dismissive hand. Probably just a vet from town. Old-timers wander over sometimes. No harm. The corporal looked uncertain, but backed off. Okonkwo had that effect on people 20 years of service, and a silver star gave you the authority to make small calls like this. Isaiah nodded his thanks so slight it was almost invisible and moved deeper into the tent. That's when Reed saw him. Jesus Christ, Reed muttered loud enough for his immediate circle to hear. Someone leave the nursing home unlocked. A few operators within earshot chuckled. Not loud, not cruel. Just that casual dismissiveness that happens when young men who've never learned to fear their own mortality see someone who's survived everything they can't imagine. Isaiah didn't react. He moved to the edge of one of the tactical displays, studying a three-dimensional rendering of the hostage scenario they'd just completed. His eyes tracked the operator movements, the breach points, the extraction routes. His head tilted slightly, like someone reading music and hearing something off-key. Reed watched him for a moment, his irritation growing. The old man's presence felt wrong somehow. This was a space for warriors, for men and women who'd earned their place through blood and sweat in trials that broke most people. What was some random senior citizen doing here, touching their equipment, looking at their hay? Reed's voice cut across the tent. Old-timer. Isaiah's hand paused over the holographic controls. He didn't turn around. Yeah, you in the orange. Reed's voice carried that particular edge of someone who enjoyed an audience. You lost Bingo Halls about 15 miles that way. The laughter was louder this time. A female Air Force PJ snorted into her hand. Two Marine Raiders exchanged grins. Even Torres, who generally disapproved of Reed's antics, cracked a smile. Isaiah turned slowly. His face showed nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, no fear. Just that same careful calm like a lake at dawn. Just observing, Isaiah said quietly. Observing. Reed crossed his arms, his seal trident catching the light. Tell me something, Pops. You ever serve? I did. What branch? The Cub Scouts. The laughter rolled through the tent, now genuine and harsh. A baby-faced Navy ensign fresh out of Annapolis actually slapped his knee. Isaiah's expression didn't change. Army. Army. Reed nodded slowly, playing it up. Let me guess. Supply clerk motor pool. Maybe you mopped floors at Fort wherever the hell. Reconnaissance. The word landed in the tent like a stone in still water. The laughter didn't exactly stop, but it faltered uncertainty creeping in at the edges. Reed's smile widened. Reconnaissance. Really? He looked around the tent, playing to his audience. Hear that, everyone? We've got a real snake-eater here. Probably did some hardcore map reading back in the day. Something like that, Isaiah said. His voice remained level, unthreatened. But Reed was on a roll now. He could feel the attention of the room, could feel the way the younger officers were watching him handle this situation. This was what leadership looked like, maintaining the sanctity of their space, keeping the standards high. At least, that's what he told himself. Tell you what, Recon, Reed said, taking a step closer. Since you're so interested in our operation, why don't you enlighten us? How would you have run the mission? Isaiah's eyes moved back to the holographic display. He studied it for a long moment, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, almost distant. Your breach team entered through the north corridor, 3-man stack. That's right. Reed's tone was patronizing. Standard procedure. Except the windows on that corridor face east. Early morning sun would have backlit your stack. Any hostile with a rifle inside would have had perfect silhouettes. The tent got quieter. Reed's smile stiffened. The simulation didn't account for. The simulation is wrong then. Isaiah's finger traced a different route on the display. South entrance, longer approach, but you'd have the sun behind you. Every advantage. Captain Torres leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the display. He's not wrong, Reed. I'm not asking for his tactical input, Reed snapped. His face had gone red. This is a restricted, and your extraction. Isaiah continued as if Reed hadn't spoken, his voice still quiet, but somehow carrying more weight. You had your vehicle staged on the west side. Good for fast exit, Bad for defensive positioning if you took fire during exfil. One of the Marine Raiders, a gunnery sergeant named Pacheco with 2 Purple Hearts, pulled up the scenario parameters on his tablet. His eyebrows rose. The hostile reinforcement route in the scenario comes from the west. If they'd timed it right, he whistled low, we'd have driven straight into an ambush. It's a training scenario, Reed said, his voice tight. Not real world. Training scenarios are supposed to prepare you for real world, Isaiah said. Otherwise, what's the point? The tent had gone almost completely silent now. Even the background hum of computers and climate control systems seemed to fade. Every operator in the space had stopped what they were doing, watching this impossible confrontation, a cocky SEAL lieutenant getting tactical lessons from an old man in an orange polo shirt. Reed's hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to be his moment, his triumph. The record-setting run that would get written up in after-action reports and maybe earn him a commendation. And now this random nobody was picking apart his mission in front of everyone. You know what, old man? Reed's voice had lost its theatrical quality. Now it was just cold. I don't know who you think you are, but this is a closed facility. You need to leave. Lieutenant, Okonkwo's voice carried a warning tone. Easy. No, Sergeant, this is bullshit. Reed pointed at Isaiah. This man has no clearance to be here, no authority to be reviewing our operations. And frankly, I'm tired of pretending his World War II war stories have any relevance to modern warfare. Vietnam, Isaiah said quietly. What, Vietnam? Not World War II? Reed laughed sharp and mean. Oh, excuse me, Vietnam. That changes everything. Tell me, were you dodging bullets or just dodging the draft? The temperature in the tent seemed to drop 20 degrees. Even Reed's most loyal teammates shifted uncomfortably. There were lines you didn't cross, and Reed had just sprinted past one. Isaiah's face remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes. Not anger exactly, something older, deeper. The look of a man who'd heard worse, survived worse, and learned that some fights weren't worth having. I should go, Isaiah said simply. He turned toward the exit. Yeah, you should. Reed's voice followed him. And next time you want to play soldier, try a VFW hall. They serve your kind there. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Your kind. Captain Torres's head snapped up. Reed, stand down, now. But Reed was too far gone, too caught up in his own righteous indignation. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. We have standards here. Security protocols. You can't just have random people wandering through. Marcus, Torres's voice cracked like a whip. Shut your mouth. Reed blinked, suddenly aware that the entire tent was staring at him. Not with amusement anymore, not with approval, with something that looked a lot like disgust. Private First Class Jennifer Ramirez, a communications specialist, barely 6 months out of AIT, stood frozen at her workstation. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at Isaiah's back, at the way he moved toward the exit with quiet dignity, refusing to be hurried, refusing to show that Reed's words had landed. But Ramirez saw something else, something that made her blood run cold. On the back of Isaiah's orange polo, partially hidden by the way the fabric bunched at his shoulder, was a patch, faded olive drab, barely visible in the tent's artificial light. Most people probably didn't even notice it. But Ramirez had spent her entire childhood in her grandfather's house surrounded by military memorabilia, photographs of units that didn't exist in any official record stories that ended with, and that's all I can say about that. The patch showed a serpent coiled around a dagger with Vietnamese characters she couldn't read. But she recognized the design. She'd seen it once in a locked case in her grandfather's study next to a Medal of Honor he'd never worn, and a Purple Heart he'd never claimed. Her grandfather had told her that patch belonged to ghosts. Men who'd gone into places no American was supposed to be, done things no official report would ever acknowledge, and come back changed. If they came back at all. Her hand moved to her phone before her brain fully processed what she was doing. She pulled up her contacts, scrolling to a name she hadn't called in 6 months. Captain James Evans, her grandfather's best friend, and the closest thing to an uncle she'd ever had. He answered on the second ring. Ramirez. This better be good. I'm in the middle of... Sir, Her voice was barely a whisper. I need you to look up a name. Isaiah Freeman, Army, Vietnam era. I think he's here. The line went silent for 3 full seconds. Say that again, Evans said. His voice had changed completely. Isaiah Freeman. He's at the Joint Ops facility. Some SEAL lieutenant just humiliated him in front of the entire command staff. Jesus Christ. Evans breathed out slowly. What did the lieutenant say? Exactly. Ramirez glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Called him old man, mocked his service, made him leave the command tent. Sir, he wore it. He just took it and walked away. Don't let him leave the facility. Evans' voice had gone razor sharp. I don't care what you have to do. Flat tire roadblock, fake a goddamn emergency if you have to. Keep Isaiah Freeman on that base. Sir, I'm just a PFC. I can't. Then find someone who can. How long ago did this happen? 2 minutes, maybe 3. I'm 15 minutes out. If I break every traffic law between here and there, maybe 10. There was a sound of car doors slamming, an engine roaring to life. Ramirez, listen to me. That man you just watched get disrespected. He's the reason half the tactics in your field manual exist. He's a legend that most generals don't have clearance to know about, and someone just spit in his face. Ramirez felt her stomach drop. What do I do? Pray that whoever insulted him has a good lawyer. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Ramirez stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Around her, the command tent had devolved into chaos. Captain Torres was chewing out reed in a voice that could strip paint. Okonkwo was shaking his head in disgust. The other operators were either pretending to focus on their work or openly discussing what they'd just witnessed. Nobody was paying attention to the young communications specialist in the corner. Nobody saw her slip out of the tent following the old man in the orange polo as he made his way slowly across the compound toward the parking lot. Isaiah moved with that same careful deliberation, his small frame navigating between Humvees and supply trucks, like a ghost drifting through a world that had mostly forgotten he existed. He didn't hurry, didn't look back, just walked with the quiet purpose of a man who'd learned long ago that dignity couldn't be given or taken, only chosen. Ramirez caught up with him near the gate, her heart pounding. Sir, excuse me, sir. Isaiah turned his face, showing mild surprise but no alarm. Yes. Up close, she could see details she'd missed in the tent. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his hands, despite their age, still held a certain readiness, like they remembered how to do things that might become necessary. The depth in his eyes that came from seeing things that left permanent marks. I'm sorry, Ramirez said. For what happened in there? Lieutenant Reed was way out of line. Isaiah smiled small and sad. Young men say young things. Nothing I haven't heard before. That doesn't make it right. No, Isaiah agreed. But right and wrong don't always determine what happens, just what we do after. Ramirez swallowed hard. Every instinct told her not to pry, not to ask to let this man go home with whatever peace he could salvage from the day. But Evans's voice echoed in her head. Don't let him leave. That patch on your shoulder, she said carefully. My grandfather had one like it. He never told me what it meant, just that the men who wore it were special. Something flickered in Isaiah's eyes. Not suspicion exactly, more like recognition. The look of someone who'd found another member of a club so exclusive that most people didn't know it existed. Your grandfather sounds like a smart man, Isaiah said quietly. He was. He passed 2 years ago. Ramirez blinked back sudden tears. He never talked much about the war, said there were things that didn't need remembering out loud. Isaiah nodded slowly. That's one way to carry it. Is it true? Ramirez couldn't stop herself now. The stories about the men who wore that patch, that they went places no one else could go, did things no one else could do. We did what needed doing, Isaiah said. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Same as your generation. Same as the one before mine. We all serve the best way we know how. Behind them, the sound of engines grew louder. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Isaiah glanced toward the sound, his military instincts still sharp enough to recognize urgency when he heard it. Expecting someone? I think so, Ramirez said. She felt relief and terror in equal measure. Sir, would you mind waiting here for just a minute? I think there's someone who wants to meet you. Isaiah studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled a real smile this time with genuine warmth. You called someone, didn't you? Ramirez's face went red. You thought right, young soldier. Isaiah patted her shoulder gently. I'll wait. The convoy came into view 30 seconds later. 3 black SUVs and 2 Humvees moving in formation with the kind of precision that suggested either VIPs or very serious business. Possibly both. They screeched to a halt at the gate, and Captain James Evans emerged from the lead vehicle before it had fully stopped. He was a tall black man in his late 50s, his dress uniform immaculate despite the obvious rush he'd been in. The silver oak leaves on his shoulders caught the desert sun, but it was his face that commanded attention, carved from granite with eyes that had seen 3 wars and countless operations that would never make the history books. He saw Isaiah and stopped dead. For a moment, the 2 men just stared at each other across 20 feet of desert hardpan. Then Evans moved fast, closing the distance in long strides. Isaiah Freeman, he said. His voice was rough. My God. James. Isaiah's smile widened. Been a while. 20 years. Maybe 25. Evans shook his head slowly. You look good. You're a terrible liar. Always were. Evans laughed, the sound carrying equal parts joy and disbelief. Then his expression sobered. Ramirez briefed me on the way over. Tell me it isn't true. Isaiah's smile faded. Depends what she told you. That some SEAL lieutenant with more ego than sense humiliated you in front of the command staff. Used language that... Evans's jaw tightened. That crossed lines. Boys will be boys, Isaiah said mildly. Bullshit. Evans's voice went sharp. You're Isaiah Freeman. You don't get to be dismissed by anyone, let alone some cocky operator who doesn't know his history. From the second SUV, more officers emerged. A 2-star general named Patricia Whitmore, her hair steel gray and her bearing absolutely uncompromising. A colonel from JSOC whose name was classified even on his uniform. 2 master sergeants who moved like coiled springs. They all headed straight for Isaiah. Ramirez watched her eyes wide as General Whitmore approached the old man in the orange polo and extended her hand. Commander Freeman, she said. It's an honor, a real one. Isaiah shook her hand gently. General, I think there's been some confusion. I'm not... You were Captain Isaiah Freeman, 5th Special Forces Group, attached to MACV-SOG running operations in Laos and Cambodia from 1968 to 1973. Whitmore's voice carried the kind of certainty that came from reading very classified files. After that, you were part of a team that officially doesn't exist, operating in places we officially never went, doing things we officially never did. 78 confirmed missions. 0 casualties under your command. 3 silver stars, 2 bronze stars with V device, and 1 recommendation for the Medal of Honor that got buried because your entire unit was classified beyond top secret. Isaiah said nothing, but something in his stillness confirmed every word. So yes, Whitmore continued, Commander Freeman, or if you prefer, we can use your operational call sign. She paused, letting the weight build. The ghost of Da Nang. Ramirez felt her breath catch. She'd heard that name once whispered in her grandfather's study late at night when he'd had too much whiskey and not enough sleep. A story about a man who could move through enemy territory like smoke, who planned operations so perfect they seemed supernatural, who brought his people home when everyone else said the mission was impossible. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice quiet. That was a long time ago. Respect doesn't have an expiration date, Evans said firmly. Neither does the debt this military owes you. I didn't come here for respect, Isaiah said. I came because my nephew's kid is part of the training program here. Wanted to watch from a distance, see how the new generation operates. Didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause anything. Whitmore's eyes went hard. Someone else did, and we're about to correct that. She turned to Evans. Captain, I want every officer who was in that command tent assembled immediately. Full dress, no exceptions. Yes, ma'am. Evans pulled out his radio. All personnel command tent 15 minutes. Full uniform. This is not a drill. Isaiah raised a hand. Yeah. General, really, this isn't necessary. I'm fine. I've dealt with worse. I'm sure you have. Whitmore's voice softened slightly. But here's the thing, Commander. Men like you spent your entire service in shadows, never getting the recognition you earned because your operations were too sensitive to acknowledge. You made the ultimate sacrifice, not dying for your country, but living for it in silence. So forgive me if I'm not inclined to let that silence be mistaken for insignificance. She gestured toward the command tent. Besides, this isn't about you, not really. This is about teaching the next generation something they apparently missed in their leadership training. That the men and women who came before them deserve more than casual dismissal. That history matters. That respect isn't something you withhold until someone proves themselves worthy. It's something you give until they prove themselves unworthy. Isaiah looked at the general for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. Thank you. Whitmore turned to Ramirez. Private, you did good work today. That took courage. Ramirez snapped to attention, her face flushed. Just doing what's right, ma'am. That's exactly what courage is, Whitmore said. Now come with us. You're part of this too. The group moved back toward the command tent, Isaiah at the center, like a living piece of history being carefully transported to where it belonged. Ramirez walked slightly behind her, mind still reeling. In the space of 10 minutes, she'd gone from routine communications duty to being part of something she suspected would be talked about for years. Inside the command tent, Lieutenant Reed stood at rigid attention, confusion and dawning dread warring on his face. Captain Torres had ordered everyone to dress uniform without explanation, and the speed of the compliance had been telling. When a two-star general shows up unannounced and demands full assembly, you don't ask questions. You move. The tent had been reconfigured. All the tactical displays had been shut down. The tables pushed back. A clear space created at the center like a courtroom awaiting its defendant. 43 officers and senior NCOs stood in formation, their uniforms immaculate, their faces reflecting varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Reed stood among them, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. He'd seen the convoy arrive, seen the ranks stepping out, and somewhere in his gut he knew this was about him. The entrance flap opened. General Whitmore entered first, moving with the kind of authority that made E9s nervous. Captain Evans followed, his face carved from stone. Then the JSOC colonel, the master sergeants, Ramirez. And finally, Isaiah Freeman, moving with that same careful deliberation, his orange polo bright against all the camouflage and dress uniforms surrounding him. Every eye in the tent tracked him. Reed felt his stomach plummet to somewhere around his boots. The old man. They'd brought back the old man. Why would they? Attention! Evans' voice cracked like thunder. Every soldier in the tent snapped to perfect attention, backs straight, eyes forward, hands at their sides. All except Isaiah, who stood at ease near the entrance, looking vaguely uncomfortable with all the fuss. General Whitmore moved to the center of the space. Her eyes swept across the assembly, landing on each face with the weight of judgment. In approximately 90 minutes, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the tent. Some of you participated in or witnessed an incident involving the gentleman standing to my left. An incident that I am told involved disrespect, mockery, and language that has no place in this military. The silence was absolute. Before we address that incident, Whitmore continued, I think it's important that you understand exactly who you were dealing with, because clearly, someone in this tent made a critical error in judgment. An error that suggests a fundamental failure to understand what it means to serve with honor. She turned to Isaiah. Commander Freeman, would you join me, please? Isaiah walked forward slowly. When he reached the center, he turned to face the assembly, his weathered face calm, his hands still clasped behind his back. Whitmore stood beside him. This is Captain Retired Isaiah Freeman. Between 1968 and 1975, Commander Freeman ran 78 covert operations in Southeast Asia. He led teams into Cambodia when we officially weren't there, into Laos when we officially had no presence, into North Vietnam itself on 3 separate occasions when everyone told him it was impossible. She paused, letting that sink in. His tactics manual, written in 1974 and still classified, forms the basis for approximately 60% of the special operations doctrine currently being taught at Fort Bragg, Coronado, and Quantico. The triple-phase insertion you practiced this morning, Freeman wrote it. The adaptive extraction protocol that saved 6 operators in Syria last year, Freeman developed it in a jungle 40 years ago with no backup and hostile forces on 3 sides. Murmurs rippled through the formation. Eyes widened. Even Reed, despite himself, felt a chill run down his spine. Commander Freeman was awarded 3 silver stars for operations that to this day you don't have clearance to read about. His unit, which operated under the designation Studies and Observations, Group Forward Operations, Team 01, was so classified that when the war ended, all records were sealed. His teammates are mostly dead now. The ones who survived are prohibited by federal law from discussing what they did. Whitmore's voice dropped lower, harder. This man bled in jungles you've only seen in movies. He made decisions that saved lives while knowing that if he died, no one would ever know his name. He came home to a country that spit on him, called him baby killer, treated him like he was less than human because of the uniform he wore and the color of his skin. The general's eyes found Reed in the formation. And today, someone in this tent looked at him and saw nothing worth respecting. Saw an old man who'd wandered into the wrong place. Saw someone to mock, to humiliate, to dismiss. Reed's face had gone pale. "Lieutenant Reed," Whitmore said softly. "Front and center." Reed stepped forward on legs that felt like water. Every step was agony. Every eye in the tent burned into him. He stopped 3 feet from Isaiah and came to attention, eyes fixed somewhere over the old man's shoulder. "Lieutenant," Whitmore said, "do you remember what you said to Commander Freeman approximately 20 minutes ago?" Reed's throat was desert dry. "Ma'am, I asked you a question." "Yes, ma'am, I remember." "Tell him, now, while everyone listens." Reed's hands trembled. This was a nightmare. This had to be a nightmare. He'd wake up and, "I'm waiting, Lieutenant." Reed forced the words out, each one like swallowing glass. "I called him old man. Told him he was lost. Made jokes about him not understanding military operations. Suggested that he go to a VFW hall because..." His voice cracked. "Because they serve his kind there." The collective intake of breath from the assembly was audible. Isaiah's expression didn't change. He simply stood there looking at Reed with those dark, calm eyes. "Now," Whitmore said, "I want you to look at him. Really look at him. Look at the man you insulted." Reed's eyes reluctantly moved to Isaiah's face. Up close, he could see details he'd missed before. The scar tissue on Isaiah's hands that suggested old injuries, old pain. The way he held himself despite his age, not with weakness but with the economy of someone who'd learned to conserve energy, because there were times when energy meant survival. The patch on his sleeve that Reed had mocked, now visible in full detail. The serpent and dagger. The Vietnamese characters that spelled something Reed couldn't read, but somehow understood, meant more than any modern unit insignia ever would. "This man," Whitmore said, "has done more for this country before breakfast than most of us will do in our entire careers." And you, Lieutenant Reed, looked at him and saw a joke. Reed felt tears burning behind his eyes. "Ma'am, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't care. You saw an elderly black man in civilian clothes and made assumptions that say more about your character than his." Whitmore turned to face the entire assembly. "This is the lesson, people. This is what I need you to understand. The warriors who came before us don't always look like what you expect. They don't always wear their service on their sleeve. They don't always announce themselves. Some of the most heroic people you'll ever meet will seem ordinary, quiet, unassuming. And if your first instinct is to dismiss them, to mock them, to treat them as less than, then you've already failed as a leader. She looked back at Reed. You're relieved of your team command effective immediately. You'll spend the next 6 months in leadership remediation. If you make it through that, and it's a big if, maybe you'll earn your way back to operations. But right now, you're not fit to lead anyone. Reed's world crumbled. His command, his team, everything he'd worked for. Ma'am, please. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Get out of my sight. Reed wanted to argue, wanted to explain, wanted to make her understand that he wasn't a bad person, just a person who'd made a bad mistake. But the look in Whitmore's eyes told him everything he needed to know. The time for explanations had ended 20 minutes ago. He saluted sharp, perfect, the muscle memory of 1,000 drills taking over when his mind failed him. Then he turned and walked out of the tent, each step echoing in the silence. The flap closed behind him and he was gone. Inside, Whitmore turned to Isaiah. Commander, I apologize on behalf of this command, this service, and every man and woman who failed to give you the respect you earned. Isaiah shook his head slowly. General, with respect, you don't need to apologize for someone else's mistakes. Maybe not, Whitmore said, but I choose to anyway. Then she did something that made 43 warriors suck in their breath. She saluted, sharp, crisp, holding it with the kind of precision that comes from 3 decades of practice. Sir, she said quietly, it's an honor. For 3 heartbeats, Isaiah didn't move. Then slowly he returned the salute. His hand came up weathered and scarred and held steady. The entire tent followed suit. Every officer, every NCO, every operator from every branch. Hands rising in unison, holding that ancient gesture of respect that transcended rank, transcended time, transcended every petty division that humans created to separate themselves from each other. Isaiah Freeman, 75 years old, small built, wearing an orange polo and khaki pants, stood at the center of it all and felt something he hadn't felt in 40 years. Not pride, not vindication, just the simple knowledge that someone remembered. That the sacrifices made in shadow hadn't been completely swallowed by silence. That he'd mattered. Captain Evans stepped forward, his hands still at his brow. Welcome home, Commander. Welcome home. And in that moment, in a military tent in the Nevada desert, surrounded by warriors who finally understood what they were looking at, Isaiah Freeman came home. Stay with me. This story is just beginning. In the next part, we'll see how Reed's fall from grace reverberates through the base and discover why Captain Evans has been keeping Isaiah's identity secret for so long. The truth about the ghost of Da Nang is darker and more complicated than anyone imagined. The salutes lowered slowly, hands dropping back to sides with the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone in the tent. Isaiah Freeman stood in the center of it all, his orange polo seeming to glow brighter somehow, like a beacon in a sea of camouflage and brass. Captain Evans broke the silence first. Commander, there's someone here who needs to hear your voice more than regulations say I should allow. He gestured to Ramirez. Her grandfather served with us. Miguel Ramirez. You remember him? Isaiah's eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion breaking through his calm exterior. Miguel. God, yes. How is he? He passed 2 years ago, sir, Ramirez said quietly. Cancer. Isaiah's face fell. I'm sorry. He was a good man. One of the best operators I ever worked with. He never stopped talking about you, Ramirez said. Her voice cracked slightly. He called you the ghost, said you could see things others couldn't, said you saved his life at least 3 times. He saved mine 4, Isaiah replied. We don't keep score among brothers. General Whitmore cleared her throat. Commander, I know you came here to observe, not to participate, but I'm going to ask something of you anyway. These operators need to hear from someone who lived it, who survived it, who understands what it really means to lead when everything goes to hell and the only thing standing between your team and disaster is the decision you make in the next 3 seconds. Isaiah looked around the tent at the assembled warriors. Young faces, hard faces, confident faces that hadn't yet learned that confidence could get you killed just as fast as cowardice. He'd seen that same mix of arrogance and skill 50 years ago in men who didn't all make it home. "What do you want me to say?" Isaiah asked. "The truth," Whitmore said simply. "Whatever version of it you're comfortable sharing." Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right." The general gestured to the center of the space. "It's yours, Commander." Isaiah moved to where everyone could see him clearly. He didn't stand at attention or parade rest, just stood naturally, hands loose at his sides like a grandfather about to tell a story at a family dinner. But there was something in his stillness that commanded attention more effectively than any drill sergeant's bark. "I'm not going to tell you war stories," Isaiah began, his voice carrying clearly despite its quietness. "You've all heard war stories. Most of them are lies anyway, or at least heavily edited. What I'm going to tell you is something simpler and harder." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "In 1969, I led a team into Laos to recover a downed pilot. Intelligence said the area was clear. Intelligence was wrong. We walked into an ambush, 30 NVA regulars, well-positioned, well-armed. My team was 6 men. The math wasn't good. The tent was absolutely silent. We had 2 choices: fight through and probably die, or surrender and definitely die slower. I chose a third option. I walked out into the open with my hands up. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembly. My second in command, a sergeant named Davis, thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But I walked out there and I spoke to them in Vietnamese. Not good Vietnamese, my accent was terrible. But enough that they understood I wasn't just some grunt. I told them we didn't want to fight. I told them we were there for 1 man, 1 pilot, and if they'd let us take him and leave, we'd go quietly. Isaiah's eyes grew distant, seeing something 40 years gone. Their commander laughed at me, called me a fool, said Americans were all arrogant, thought they owned the world. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. We did think that. Most of us, anyway. So I agreed with him. In front of my team, in front of his soldiers, I said, "You're absolutely right. We are arrogant. We do think we're better than everyone else. And maybe that's why we keep losing." Captain Torres leaned forward, her eyes locked on Isaiah. That commander, he stopped laughing. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he asked me why I was really there. Not the mission, why I personally was in his country, fighting his people. And I told him the truth. I said I didn't know anymore. I said I'd believed the speeches when I enlisted, believed in duty and honor and protecting freedom. But somewhere between the villages we burned and the bodies we counted, I'd stopped being sure what any of it meant. Isaiah's voice dropped lower. He let us go. Walked us to the downed pilot, let us carry him out. His soldiers watched us the whole way, guns ready, but they didn't fire. When we reached the tree line, that commander called out to me. He said, "Maybe you are not so arrogant after all, or maybe you are just honest. Either way, I hope you survive this war. Someone should." The silence in the tent had weight now, pressure, like everyone was holding their breath. "I tell you this story because of what happened after," Isaiah continued. "When we got back to base, my commanding officer wanted to court-martial me. Said I'd shown weakness in front of the enemy. Said I'd undermined American resolve. Said I was a disgrace to the uniform. But my team, every single one of them, filed statements saying I'd saved their lives with the only weapon that mattered in that moment: humility." He looked directly at the spot where Reed had been standing. "Pride is a luxury you can't afford when lives are on the line. The moment you think you know everything, the moment you think you can't learn from someone else, the moment you look at another human being and see only what makes them different from you, that's the moment you become a liability to your team." General Whitmore nodded slowly. Commander Freeman was right about our tactical approach today. The breaches, the extraction points, the timing. He saw flaws in seconds that took our analysis team hours to identify. And one of my officers responded by mocking him because he couldn't see past the orange shirt and the gray hair. "I've made that mistake too," Isaiah said. "We all have. The question isn't whether you'll judge someone wrong. You will. The question is what you do when you realize your judgment was garbage." He turned to face the entire assembly. That young lieutenant who just left, he's not a bad man. He's a scared man. Scared that if he shows any weakness, someone will think he's not good enough. Scared that if he admits he doesn't know something, he'll lose respect. Scared that the rank on his chest is the only thing holding him together. I know because I was that man once. Sergeant Okonkwo, the massive ranger who'd initially defended Isaiah's presence, spoke up. "What changed you, sir?" Isaiah smiled sadly. "I watched someone better than me die because I was too proud to listen to his instincts. His name was Thomas Porter. He was 19 years old. We were running a recon mission near the Cambodian border. Tommy told me he had a bad feeling about the route we were taking. I told him to trust the intel. He did. The intel was wrong. He stepped on a mine meant for me." The old man's hands clenched briefly, then relaxed. "Tommy lived long enough to tell me it wasn't my fault. That's the worst part. He forgave me before he died, but I never forgave myself. And that's when I learned that leadership isn't about being right. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe being honest, especially when that honesty challenges your plans." Captain Evans stepped forward. "The commander and I served together for 3 years. I was a baby lieutenant fresh out of West Point, absolutely certain I knew how wars were won because I'd read Sun Tzu and Clausewitz. Isaiah here had about 3 months of formal military training and a GED. You know what he taught me on my first mission?" Evans paused for effect. "He taught me that the most dangerous phrase in the military is, 'We've always done it this way.' We were supposed to extract via helicopter from a hot LZ. Standard procedure." Isaiah took one look at the terrain and said, "That's a kill zone. Anyone who lands there dies." I pulled rank. Told him we were following the op plan. He said, "Yes, sir," and prepped for exactly what I ordered. But he also prepped a backup route nobody authorized. When that helicopter took fire and couldn't land, when I froze because everything I'd learned in school suddenly meant nothing, Isaiah calmly said, "This way," and led us out on foot. All 10 of us made it home. Evans's voice roughened. I submitted a Silver Star recommendation for him. It got denied because technically he'd violated orders by scouting that backup route. That's when I learned that medals don't always go to the people who deserve them. They go to the people whose heroism fits inside the right paperwork. General Whitmore crossed her arms. The military has a complicated relationship with unconventional thinking. We say we want leaders who can adapt, who can think outside the box. But when someone actually does it, we panic because it threatens the structure we've built our entire system on. Commander Freeman spent his entire career walking that line, being just rebellious enough to save lives, just obedient enough to avoid prison. It wore me out, Isaiah admitted. By 1975, I was done. I'd given everything I had. Came home to a country that didn't want to look at me. Couldn't get a job because everyone assumed Vietnam vets were drugged-out time bombs. Ended up working construction for 20 years. Good work. Honest work. Nobody cared about my tactical expertise, but at least they didn't spit on me. Private Ramirez found her voice. My grandfather said you disappeared. He looked for you for years. Isaiah's expression softened. I needed to disappear for a while. The things we did, the things we saw you carry that differently depending on who you are. Miguel, he processed it by staying connected to the military community. Me, I needed distance. Needed to remember that there was a world outside of kill zones and body counts. Took me a decade to even talk about the war. Another decade to stop having nightmares. Do they ever stop? The question came from a young Marine captain named Reeves, his voice barely above a whisper. The nightmares. Isaiah looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition. The kind that only comes from shared darkness. No, Isaiah said honestly. They don't stop. They just change. You learn to live with them. You learn that carrying the weight is part of the price. But here's what nobody tells you, you don't have to carry it alone. That's what I got wrong for so long. I thought asking for help was weakness. I thought admitting I was struggling meant I was broken. Took me until I was 50 years old to start therapy. Best decision I ever made. The admission hung in the air. A Special Forces legend. A man who'd survived the most classified operations in American military history, admitting he'd needed help to survive himself. Captain Torres wiped her eyes quickly, hoping nobody noticed. "Sir, how did you deal with the racism, coming home to people who saw your service as less valuable because of your skin color?" Isaiah's jaw tightened. "I stopped trying to prove my worth to people determined not to see it. That's the trap. You can show them every medal, every scar, every mission report, and they'll still find a reason to dismiss you. So I stopped performing for their approval, started living for my own peace." He glanced toward the tent entrance where Reed had left. "That lieutenant today, he said things I've heard 1,000 times before. Your kind. As if being black and being a soldier were somehow contradictory. As if the military hasn't always relied on people of color to fight its wars while denying them basic respect. You know what the worst part is?" Nobody answered. "The worst part is wondering if he's right. Not about me being less than I know my worth, but wondering if this country will ever see me as more than a problem to be managed, or a token to be displayed. Wondering if my grandkids will have to prove themselves the way I had to over and over until you're so tired you can't remember what you were trying to prove in the first place." The rawness in his voice cut through the tent like a blade. General Whitmore stepped forward, her face set in hard lines. "Commander Freeman, I can't undo decades of injustice. I can't make people see what they're determined not to see. But I can promise you this: in my command under my watch, that kind of disrespect ends today. Not just the blatant stuff, the subtle stuff too, the assumptions, the dismissals, the casual cruelty that people don't even recognize as cruelty because they've done it for so long." She turned to face the assembly. "Every person in this tent is going to undergo mandatory training on implicit bias, systemic racism, and the history of black service members in the American military. Not the sanitized version, the real version. The version that includes how we used black soldiers as test subjects for chemical weapons, how we segregated units while preaching unity, how we awarded fewer medals to black service members for identical actions, how we court-martialed black soldiers at disproportionate rates. All of it." Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the group. "I don't care if it makes you uncomfortable," Whitmore said sharply. "You should be uncomfortable. You should feel the weight of a system that elevated some of us while crushing others. Because until you understand that weight, you're going to keep making mistakes like Reed made today. You're going to keep looking at legends like Commander Freeman and seeing nothing worth your respect." Captain Evans nodded. "The military likes to pretend it's a meritocracy. That rank and achievement erase everything else. But Commander Freeman earned 3 silver stars and came home to a country where he couldn't eat in certain restaurants, where he had to sit in the back of buses, where children threw rocks at him because his uniform made him a target. And I stayed," Isaiah said quietly. "Even after all that, I stayed. Because despite everything wrong with this country, despite every failure and betrayal, I still believed in the idea of it. Still believed we could be better than we were. Maybe that makes me a fool." "It makes you a patriot," Whitmore said firmly. "The real kind. Not the kind who wraps themselves in the flag and demands everyone else prove their loyalty, but the kind who sees all the flaws and fights to fix them anyway." Sergeant Okonkwo cleared his throat. "Sir, can I ask you something that's been bothering me since this started?" Isaiah nodded. "Why did you just take it when Reed was mocking you, when he told you to leave? Why didn't you say something? Show him your credentials, pull rank, anything?" Isaiah considered the question carefully. "Because I wanted to see what he'd do. I wanted to see if anyone would stand up for an old man they didn't know for no reason, except it was the right thing to do. And you know what? Nobody did. Not at first. You all just stood there and watched. Some of you laughed. The shame in the tent was palpable. That tells me something important," Isaiah continued. "It tells me that all your training, all your discipline, all your supposed brotherhood, it doesn't extend to people who don't fit your image of what a warrior looks like. You'll die for the person next to you in combat, but you'll stand by and watch them get humiliated in peacetime because it's easier than speaking up." Captain Torres's voice was thick. "You're right. I should have shut Reed down immediately. I didn't. I let it happen because, she paused, struggling, because I was curious where he'd take it, how far he'd go. That's inexcusable. It's human, Isaiah said. We all have moments where we choose comfort over courage. The question is what you do next, whether you learn from it or rationalize it away. He looked around at all of them, these warriors from the most elite units in the American military, and saw them clearly. Saw their strength and their weakness, their capability and their blindness. Saw himself 40 years ago, so sure of his righteousness, so blind to his limitations. Can I tell you what scares me most about today? Isaiah asked. Everyone leaned in. What scares me is that Reed isn't unique. He's not some outlier, some bad apple. He's the product of a system that rewards confidence over competence, aggression over wisdom, volume over substance. He learned to lead by watching others lead, which means somewhere up the chain someone taught him that mockery was an acceptable form of command, that dismissing people was a sign of strength, that respect was something you demanded rather than earned. General Whitmore's face darkened. You're suggesting the rot goes deeper than one lieutenant. I'm suggesting that if you want to fix this, you need to look at what you're teaching your leaders about leadership. Because right now you're graduating operators who can shoot straight and breach clean and execute missions with devastating precision. But you're not teaching them how to see people, how to value wisdom over youth, how to recognize that the most important lessons often come from the quietest voices. Evans stepped closer to Isaiah. When we served together, you had a saying, something you told every new team member. You remember it. Isaiah smiled slightly. A warrior without wisdom is just a weapon waiting to fire in the wrong direction. That's it, Evans said. And you lived it. Every decision, every mission, every time you had to choose between following orders and keeping your people alive, you chose wisdom, even when it cost you. It cost me a lot, Isaiah agreed. Promotions I didn't get, medals I didn't receive, recognition that went to people with cleaner service records. But my team came home. Every single one of them. That's the only metric that mattered. Private Ramirez spoke up again, her voice stronger now. My grandfather told me something before he died. He said the ghost of Da Nang could have been anything. Could have been a general, a senator, a CEO. But you chose to disappear. He never understood why. Isaiah turned to her, his eyes soft. Tell me something, Private. When you look at me now, what do you see? She blinked, caught off guard. I see a hero, sir. That's because you know my history. But this morning, when your lieutenant looked at me, what did he see? Ramirez swallowed hard. He saw an old black man who didn't belong. Exactly. And that's why I disappeared. Because I got tired of having to prove myself over and over. Tired of watching people's faces change when they learned who I was. Like I'd somehow tricked them by not announcing my credentials the moment we met. I wanted to be just Isaiah, not Commander Freeman, not the ghost. Just a man living his life, fixing his fence, watching his grandkids grow up without having to carry the weight of being someone's symbol or someone's exception. He looked directly at General Whitmore. You want to honor me, don't make me special. Don't make me the exception that proves the rule. Make me ordinary. Make it so that the next time an old black veteran walks into a military facility, people's first instinct is respect, not suspicion. Make it so that my story isn't remarkable because it shouldn't be. Every veteran should come home to dignity. Every service member should be valued for their contribution, not judged by their appearance. Whitmore held his gaze. That's going to take time, Commander. Decades, maybe. Changing culture is harder than changing policy. I know, Isaiah said. I've been waiting my whole life. What's a few more decades? The words landed with devastating quiet. Captain Evans moved to Isaiah's side. We're going to do better, brother, starting today. See that you do, Isaiah replied. Because the next generation deserves better than we got. They deserve to serve in a military that actually lives up to its promises, where equality isn't just something we write in regulations, but something we practice in every interaction. A young Air Force PJ named Chen raised his hand tentatively. Sir, how do we start? What's the first step? Isaiah considered the question. Start by questioning your assumptions. When you meet someone and make a judgment about them, and we all do, ask yourself why. What information are you using? What biases are you bringing? What might you be missing? Then do the harder thing. Engage with them as if they have something to teach you, because chances are they do. Chen nodded, slowly processing. Second, Isaiah continued, defend people who aren't in the room. When someone makes a joke at another person's expense, don't laugh. Don't stay silent. Say something. That's not funny is a complete sentence. We don't do that here is even better. Because culture changes one moment at a time, and every time you let something slide, you're voting for the world you don't want to live in. Sergeant Okonkwo grunted in agreement. I've let too many things slide. We all have, Isaiah said. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. It's being a little better today than you were yesterday. It's catching yourself before you make the same mistake twice. It's apologizing when you get it wrong instead of defending yourself. General Whitmore checked her watch. Commander, I know you came here to observe your nephew's training. I'd like to extend an invitation. Would you consider staying on as a consultant? Help us review our leadership curriculum, our tactical doctrine, our approach to integration and respect. We need voices like yours shaping the next generation. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. The tent waited. I'll think about it, he finally said. But I'm not interested in being a trophy. Someone you wheel out for diversity panels and Heritage Month events. If I do this, I do it real. I get access to everything. I review everything. And when I tell you something's wrong, you actually listen. Deal, Whitmore said without hesitation. And Commander, you'll have full authority to stop any training exercise if you see something that needs correcting. No appeals, no second guessing. Your word is final. Isaiah's eyebrows rose. That's a lot of power to give someone. You've earned it, Whitmore said simply. Besides, I have a feeling you won't abuse it. Men like you never do. The tent's entrance flap opened suddenly. A young sergeant stepped in slightly out of breath. Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. Lieutenant Reed is gone. Every head turned. Gone! Whitmore's voice went sharp. Clarify. He left the base, ma'am. Signed out at the gate 20 minutes ago. Destination unknown. Captain Evans cursed under his breath. He's running. Or hiding, Torres added. Either way, this just got more complicated. General Whitmore's face hardened. Put out a locate order. I want him found within the hour. He doesn't get to walk away from this. But Isaiah held up a hand. Let him go. Everyone stared. General, that man needs time to process what just happened. He needs space to feel the full weight of his failure without everyone watching. Chasing him down now will only make him defensive. Let him sit with it. Let him decide who he wants to be when he comes back. If he comes back, Evans muttered. He will, Isaiah said with quiet certainty. I've seen his type before. He's not broken, just cracked. Give him room to put himself back together. He'll return when he's ready. Whitmore studied Isaiah's face, then nodded slowly. All right, we'll give him 48 hours. After that, it becomes a discipline issue. Fair enough, Isaiah agreed. The assembly began to break up, operators returning to their duties, with their minds clearly elsewhere. This hadn't been the training day any of them expected. Conversations sparked in small clusters, debates about leadership, questions about history, uncomfortable reckonings with personal biases. Private Ramirez lingered as others filed out. When most of the tent had cleared, she approached Isaiah again. Sir, my grandfather left me something. A box of his military things. I never understood most of it, but there's a photograph in there, him and 5 other men somewhere in a jungle. One of them looks like you. Much younger, but the eyes are the same. Isaiah's expression shifted. You have that photograph. It's at my barracks. Would you look at it? Tell me about them. Isaiah's eyes grew distant, seeing ghosts. What did your grandfather tell you about that photo? Nothing. He'd take it out sometimes late at night and just stare at it. When I asked, he'd say, Brothers who never came home, but he never explained. Isaiah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Bring it tomorrow. I'll tell you what I can. Some stories, though, some stories stay buried. Ramirez nodded, sensing she'd touched something deep and raw. Thank you, sir. She left and Isaiah found himself alone with Evans and Whitmore. The general spoke first. That photograph she mentioned, is it what I think it is? Probably, Isaiah said. Operation Crimson Tiger, 1972. We lost 4 men that day. Evans closed his eyes. I thought all records of Crimson Tiger were destroyed. Official records were. Photographs. Personal effects, that stuff lives on. Hidden in closets and boxes waiting for someone to find it and ask questions we're not allowed to answer. Whitmore's voice was gentle. Commander, if this is going to be too difficult. Everything about that war is too difficult, Isaiah interrupted. But that's exactly why we have to talk about it. Because if we don't, if we just let it fade into classified files and sealed records, then those men died for nothing. They deserve to be remembered, even if we can't say their names out loud. He straightened, pushing away the weight of memory. I need some air. Think I'll take a walk around the facility, see how things have changed. I'll have someone escort you, Whitmore offered. I know my way around a military base, General, but thank you. He started toward the exit, then paused and looked back. That lieutenant, Reed, when he comes back, and he will, don't destroy him. Teach him. There's a good officer in there somewhere. He just needs to learn that strength isn't the same as hardness, that admitting weakness is the bravest thing a leader can do. Noted, Whitmore said. Isaiah stepped out into the desert sun, feeling its heat on his face. 75 years old and still standing. Still breathing. Still carrying the weight of choices made when he was young and thought he was invincible. But he wasn't invincible. None of them were. They were just men and women trying to do right by a world that made right harder than it should be. And that Isaiah thought as he walked slowly across the base had always been the real war. Not the one fought with bullets and blood, but the one fought with choices, with words, with the decision to see each other's humanity even when everything in your training told you to see only threats and targets. It was a war without end. But unlike the others, it was one worth fighting forever. Isaiah walked for 20 minutes before he realized someone was following him. Not close enough to be threatening, but persistent enough to be intentional. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the presence. Just kept walking past the armory, the vehicle depot, the rows of barracks that looked nothing like the ones he'd slept in 50 years ago. The footsteps finally caught up near the edge of the training grounds. You're either very confident or very stupid, Isaiah said without turning. Following an old man like you've got something to prove. Neither, sir. The voice was young male, uncertain. I just wanted to talk. Isaiah stopped and turned. The kid couldn't have been more than 23, Army Ranger tab on his shoulder. Corporal stripes, still shiny and new. His face was flushed, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. Talk then, Isaiah said. The corporal swallowed hard. I was in that tent. When Lieutenant Reed, when everything happened. I laughed. When he made that first joke about you, I laughed. Isaiah waited. I can't stop thinking about it. The corporal continued, words tumbling out faster now. I keep replaying it in my head. The way you just stood there, taking it. The way we all just watched. And I laughed like it was funny. Like someone's pain was entertainment. What's your name, son? Corporal Jake Morrison, sir. Well, Corporal Morrison, why are you telling me this? Morrison's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Because I don't know how to fix it. I can't take it back. I can't unhear my own laugh. And I'm terrified that means I'm the same as Reed. That I'm just better at hiding it. Isaiah studied the young man's face, saw genuine anguish there. You know what the difference is between you and Reed. Morrison shook his head. You're here. He ran. You're facing what you did. He's hiding from it. That doesn't erase your mistake, but it's a start. Is it enough? Morrison's voice cracked. Just acknowledging it. No, Isaiah said bluntly. It's not enough. Acknowledgement without action is just performative guilt. Makes you feel better without changing anything. Morrison flinched like he'd been slapped. But here's what you can do, Isaiah continued. Next time someone makes a joke at someone else's expense, you speak up. Next time someone gets dismissed because of how they look or where they come from or how old they are, you interrupt. You make it uncomfortable for people to be cruel. That's how you fix it, one moment at a time. What if I mess up again? You will, Isaiah said simply. We all do. The goal isn't perfection, it's direction. Are you moving toward being better or away from it? That's the only question that matters. Morrison nodded slowly, processing. Sir, can I ask you something else? You're going to anyway. How do you not hate us? How do you stand here talking to me like I'm worth your time after what we did to you? Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, watching a training squad run drills in the distance. You think you're the first person to disrespect me, to laugh at me, to treat me like I'm less than human? No, sir. I spent my entire youth being told I wasn't good enough. Too black for some places, not black enough for others. Too educated to work with my hands, too poor to work with my mind. The military promised me it would be different, that merit was all that mattered. And for a while I believed it. Isaiah's voice hardened. Then I came home from Vietnam and got spit on at the airport. Got called baby killer by people who'd never seen combat. Got denied jobs because employers didn't want to deal with veterans. Got pulled over by cops who saw my uniform and assumed I'd stolen it. So, no, Corporal, I don't hate you. I'm just tired. Tired of having to be exceptional to be treated as acceptable. Tired of having to prove my humanity over and over. Tired of watching each new generation make the same mistakes and act surprised when people like me say we've seen this before. Morrison's eyes glistened. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change systems. Sorry doesn't rewrite training manuals. Sorry doesn't stop the next Lieutenant Reed from thinking he's entitled to mock someone because they don't fit his narrow definition of warrior. Then what does? Isaiah looked directly at him. People like you. People who laughed but felt sick about it afterward. People who recognize their failure and choose differently next time. That's how culture changes. Not from the top down with policy memos. From the ground up with thousands of small choices made by people who decide they want to be better. Morrison straightened slightly. I can do that. Good. Now get back to your unit before someone thinks you're AWOL. The corporal saluted, awkward but sincere, and jogged back toward the main facility. Isaiah watched him go, feeling every one of his 75 years settling into his bones. He continued walking, letting his feet carry him toward the far end of the base, where the old buildings still stood. They'd been condemned years ago, scheduled for demolition, but never quite getting torn down. Budget cuts or bureaucracy, probably both. The structures sagged with age and neglect, paint-peeling windows cracked. Isaiah found himself drawn to one building in particular. Building 47. The original command center from when this facility first opened in 1963. He'd been here once before a lifetime ago for a classified briefing that technically never happened. The door was chained, but the chains were rusted through. A good pull and they snapped. Isaiah pushed the door open, heard it groan on ancient hinges. Inside, everything was dust and abandonment. Old furniture covered in tarps. Filing cabinets with their drawers hanging open like slack jaws. A rotary phone on a desk receiver dangling by its cord. Thought I might find you here. Isaiah spun, hand moving instinctively to his hip where a sidearm hadn't been in 40 years. Captain Evans stood in the doorway, hands raised in mock surrender. Easy, Ghost. Just me. Isaiah's heart rate slowly returned to normal. You're getting too old to sneak up on people, James. Says the man who just broke into a condemned building. Evans stepped inside, looking around. I remember this place. We got briefed here before Operation Jade Falcon. You, me, Miguel, and the Wilson brothers. The Wilsons. Isaiah repeated softly. Haven't thought about them in years. They died well, Evans said. If there's such a thing. There isn't. Isaiah moved to one of the windows, looking out at the base beyond. They just died. The well part is something we tell ourselves to make it bearable. Evans joined him at the window. You've been avoiding me all afternoon. Any particular reason? I'm not avoiding you. You disappeared the moment the general dismissed everyone. Didn't respond to my calls. Ramirez said you were processing. What are you processing, Isaiah? Isaiah didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I'm processing the fact that after 50 years of silence, I'm suddenly supposed to be a symbol again. A teaching tool, a cautionary tale, or an inspirational story depending on what lesson someone needs to learn. Nobody's trying to use you. Yes, they are. Isaiah turned to face him. Whitmore wants me as a consultant. You want me to help train the next generation. That young corporal wanted absolution. Everyone wants something from the ghost, but nobody's asking what Isaiah wants. Evans's face softened. What do you want? I want to go home. I want to work on my fence. I want to watch my granddaughter's soccer games without thinking about kill zones and extraction points. I want to be done carrying other people's mistakes. Then why did you come here today? The question hit harder than Isaiah expected. My nephew's kid asked me to, said it would mean a lot to him. Bullshit. Evans's voice was gentle but firm. You came because part of you misses this. Misses being around people who understand what you've been through. Misses having a purpose beyond fixing fences and pretending the war didn't happen. Isaiah's jaw tightened. You don't know what I miss. I know what I miss, Evans said. I miss having brothers who saw the worst of me and loved me anyway. I miss the clarity of the mission, knowing exactly what needed to be done, even when it was impossible. I miss being young enough to think I could change things. And I know you miss it too because we're the same Isaiah. We always have been. We're not the same. We're not. You stayed in. You made general. You got the career, the recognition, the retirement with full honors. I got construction work and nightmares. Evans's voice went cold. You think I don't have nightmares. You think this uniform protected me from remembering the men we lost, the villages we destroyed, the choices we made that haunt us still. You chose it, Isaiah said. You chose to stay in a system that chewed us up and spit us out. I chose to leave. No, you chose to run. And that's fine, Isaiah. That was your right. But don't stand here and pretend you're at peace with it. Don't pretend you weren't looking for a reason to come back. The words hung between them like smoke. Isaiah turned back to the window. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was looking for something. But what I found was a reminder of why I left. That lieutenant today, he's not an outlier. He's the norm. The military hasn't changed as much as it pretends. It's just gotten better at hiding the rot. Then help us fix it, Evans said. You've got knowledge, experience, perspective that nobody else has. Use it. I'm 75 years old, James. I'm tired. Bull. You just walked 5 miles around this base without breaking a sweat. You analyzed our entire tactical approach in 30 seconds. You faced down a tent full of operators and made them see their own blindness. That's not tired. That's ready. Isaiah closed his eyes. What if I don't want to be ready anymore? Before Evans could answer, his radio crackled to life. Captain Evans, we have a situation. Lieutenant Reed just returned to base. He's at the front gate. And sir, he's not alone. Evans and Isaiah exchanged looks. Define not alone, Evans said into the radio. He's got a civilian with him, sir. Elderly black woman. She's demanding to speak with whoever's in command, says it's about her son. Isaiah felt something cold settle in his stomach. James, I heard. Evans was already moving toward the door. Come on. They reached the front gate in Evans's Jeep, arriving at the same time as General Whitmore and a small security detail. Lieutenant Reed stood next to a battered Honda Civic, his face haggard, his uniform rumpled like he'd slept in it. Or hadn't slept at all. But it was the woman beside him who commanded attention. She was perhaps 80 years old, small and bent with age, but radiating an authority that had nothing to do with physical presence. Her Sunday dress was immaculate despite the desert dust. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were fierce and bright and locked on Isaiah the moment he stepped out of the Jeep. Isaiah Freeman, she said. Her voice was strong, clear, carrying across the distance. After all these years, Isaiah froze. The world tilted sideways, memories crashing into the present with devastating force. "Martha," he breathed. "You know her?" Evans asked quietly. Isaiah couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. The woman Martha walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Reed moved as if to help her, but she waved him off impatiently. "I told myself if I ever saw you again, I'd spit in your face," Martha said when she was close enough that only Isaiah could hear. "But now that you're here, I find I just want answers." "Martha, I don't understand. How did you—" "This young man," she gestured to Reed, "came to my house this afternoon, asked me about my son, about Vietnam, about a mission that officially never happened." Her voice cracked. "About Operation Crimson Tiger." Isaiah felt his knees weaken. Evans moved to support him, but Isaiah shook him off. "Your son," Isaiah said slowly. "Thomas Porter." "My Tommy." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "My baby boy who went to war and never came home. Who died on a mission nobody would tell me about. Who got buried with honors but no explanation. You were there, Isaiah. You were his commanding officer." "I was," Isaiah whispered. "Then tell me." Martha's voice rose, decades of grief and rage finally finding release. "Tell me how my son died. Tell me why you came home and he didn't. Tell me why I spent 50 years wondering if he suffered, if he was scared, if he called for me at the end." The entire gate had gone silent. Guards officers, even Reed, stood frozen watching this confrontation unfold. General Whitmore stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm General Patricia Whitmore. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private." "No." Martha's voice was steel. "I've been private for 50 years. I've been quiet and patient and respectful of national security and military protocol. And all it got me was nightmares and an empty chair at Christmas dinner. I want answers now. Here, where everyone can hear." She turned back to Isaiah. "You owe me that much." Isaiah's hands were shaking. "Martha, the mission is still classified. I can't—" "Then declassify it." She looked at Whitmore. "General, I'm 81 years old. I've got maybe 5 good years left if I'm lucky. I'm not asking for state secrets. I'm asking for the truth about my son's death. You can give me that, or you can explain to the press why the military is still hiding behind classifications to protect its mistakes." Whitmore's face was unreadable. "That's not how—" "That's exactly how," Martha interrupted. "My son signed his life away for this country. The least you can do is tell his mother how he spent it." The general looked at Isaiah. "Commander, this is your call. I can't order you to break classification, but I also can't stop you from telling a mother about her son." Isaiah felt every eye on him, felt the weight of 50 years of silence pressing down, felt Tommy Porter's ghost standing beside him, 19 years old forever, waiting to finally be remembered out loud. "Operation Crimson Tiger," Isaiah began, his voice barely audible. "January 17th, 1972. Our mission was to eliminate a North Vietnamese supply route running through Cambodia. 8 men. 7 days deep in hostile territory." Martha's hand pressed against her mouth. "Tommy was our demolitions expert. Best I'd ever seen. Could disarm a booby trap blindfolded set charges with the precision of a surgeon. He was also the youngest member of the team. Fresh out of training. I tried to get him reassigned to something safer, but he insisted on coming. Said he wanted to prove himself." Isaiah's voice grew stronger, words he'd locked away for decades finally finding air. "We were successful. Destroyed 3 supply depots, 2 ammunition caches, and a command bunker. 0 casualties. Perfect execution. We were on our way to the extraction point when Tommy said he had a bad feeling about the route I'd chosen, said something felt wrong, but we were behind schedule. The helicopter was waiting. I overruled him." Martha made a sound like a wounded animal. "There was a mine," Isaiah continued, each word cutting like broken glass. "Pressure activated. Chinese manufacture. Buried so well our scouts missed it. Tommy saw it a split second before I stepped on it. He pushed me out of the way and took the blast himself." Tears ran down Isaiah's face, now unchecked, unashamed. "He lived for 3 minutes. Long enough to tell me not to blame myself. Long enough to ask me to tell you he loved you. Long enough to make me promise I'd look after the team, get them home safe. Then he died in my arms while I held pressure on wounds I knew were too catastrophic to survive." Martha's legs gave out. Reed caught her, easing her to the ground as she sobbed great, heaving cries that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere deep and primal. Isaiah dropped to his knees in front of her. "I'm sorry. God, Martha, I'm so sorry. He saved my life, and I've spent every day since wishing he hadn't. Wishing I'd listened to him. Wishing I'd been the one who stepped on that mine instead." "You should have been," Martha said through her tears. "It should have been you." "I know. He was my baby, my only child. He was going to be a teacher. Did you know that he was going to come home and teach math to kids who needed someone to believe in them? Instead, he's in the ground and you're here, and I hate you. I hate you so much." "I know," Isaiah said again. "I hate me too." They knelt there in the dirt, two people bound together by grief and guilt, and a war that had ended 50 years ago, but never really stopped claiming casualties. Lieutenant Reed stood above them, his face streaked with tears. When he'd left the base that morning, he'd driven aimlessly for hours, shame and anger warring in his chest. He'd ended up at a coffee shop in a small town 40 miles away, staring at his phone, reading article after article about black veterans and the Vietnam War. That's where he'd found Martha Porter's name. In an editorial she'd written 20 years ago about families who never got closure, about Gold Star mothers who were told their sons died heroes, but never learned how or why or what for. She'd mentioned Operation Crimson Tiger by name, not knowing it was classified, having pieced it together from fragments her son had let slip in letters home. Reed had driven to her house without thinking, without planning what he'd say. He'd knocked on her door, and when she answered, he'd broken down. Told her everything that had happened, about the old man he'd mocked, about the legend he'd humiliated, about Isaiah Freeman, who'd been Tommy Porter's commanding officer. Martha had stood in her doorway for 5 full minutes processing. Then she'd grabbed her purse and told Reed to drive. Now watching Isaiah and Martha kneel in the dust, Reed understood something he'd been too arrogant to see before. Leadership wasn't about being right. It was about carrying the weight of being wrong. About living with decisions that got people killed. About facing the families afterward and having no good answers, no justifications, nothing but the raw truth that war was hell, and sometimes the best men died for the worst reasons. General Whitmore moved closer to Evans. "How do we handle this?" "We don't," Evans said quietly. "We witness it. That's all we can do." Isaiah helped Martha to her feet, his movements gentle, reverent. "There's more you should know. About Tommy, about who he was to us." Martha wiped her eyes. "Tell me." "He kept us human," Isaiah said. "In the middle of all that death and darkness, Tommy found ways to make us laugh. He'd do impressions of our drill sergeant. He'd make up songs about terrible C rations. He'd talk about the classroom he was going to have someday, the students he was going to inspire. He reminded us that there was a world worth fighting for, worth surviving for." Isaiah's voice broke again. "After he died, we each made a promise that we'd live well enough for 2 people, that we'd honor his memory by being the kind of men he believed we could be. Some of us kept that promise better than others, but we all carried him with us, every day, every mission. Every time we had to choose between what was easy and what was right, we'd ask ourselves what Tommy would do." Martha touched Isaiah's face, her hand gentle. "Did he suffer?" Isaiah looked into her eyes and made a choice. The same choice he'd made in that Cambodian jungle. When Tommy had asked him to lie, to tell his mother, it was quick and painless. "No," Isaiah said. "It was fast. He didn't suffer. It was a lie. Tommy had suffered, had screamed and cried and begged for his mother in those final 3 minutes. But some truths were too cruel to speak out loud. Martha searched his face, seemed to know he was lying and loved him for it anyway. "Thank you." She turned to General Whitmore. "I want his name on the memorial. The real one, not the sanitized version. I want it to say he died in Cambodia doing something that mattered, saving his commander's life. Can you do that?" Whitmore nodded. "I can do that." "Good." Martha straightened her dress, composing herself with visible effort. And I want these young soldiers to hear Tommy's story, not the classified version, the human version, so they understand that every name on every wall represents a mother like me, a family like mine, people who live every day in the shadow of a grief that never really ends. Yes, ma'am, Whitmore said. Martha looked at Reed. You brought me here. Why? Reed struggled to find words. Because I needed to understand what it costs, what my arrogance and disrespect really mean. I thought I was just mocking an old man, but I was mocking every sacrifice, every loss, every family that gave everything for a country that didn't always give everything back. And now you understand. I'm beginning to, Reed said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand, but I'm trying. Martha studied him for a long moment. That's all any of us can do. Try. Fail. Try again. Try better. She turned back to Isaiah. I don't forgive you. I can't. But I don't hate you either. Not anymore. You've been punishing yourself for 50 years. That's enough. Isaiah shook his head. It'll never be enough. Then make it enough, Martha said firmly. Stop hiding from his death and start honoring his life. Do the work he never got to do. Teach the students he never got to inspire. Be the man he believed you could be. She gestured to the assembled soldiers, the young faces watching this drama unfold. Teach them, not just tactics and strategy. Teach them about cost, about sacrifice, about the families that carry their choices long after they've moved on to the next mission. Teach them that every decision in war echoes forward into peacetime. That the enemy isn't just the person shooting at you, it's the arrogance that makes you think you're invincible. The pride that makes you ignore good advice. The prejudice that makes you dismiss people who don't look like your definition of a warrior. Martha took Isaiah's hand, squeezed it hard. Tommy loved you. He told me that in his last letter. Said you were the best officer he'd ever served under. That you treated your team like family. That he'd follow you anywhere because he knew you'd bring him home. Her voice cracked. You didn't bring him home, Isaiah, but you can still honor his memory. You can still make his death mean something. Isaiah couldn't speak, could only nod as tears blurred his vision. Martha released his hand and turned to leave. Reed moved to help her back to the car, but she waved him off again. I can walk, she said. I've been walking with this weight for 50 years. A few more steps won't kill me. She made it 3 steps before her legs buckled. Isaiah caught her strong despite his age and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing. He carried her to the Honda, settled her gently in the passenger seat, closed the door with the care of someone handling something precious and fragile. Through the window, Martha looked up at him. Be better, Isaiah Freeman. For Tommy. For all the ones who didn't make it home. I will, Isaiah promised. Reed climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. Before he pulled away, he looked at Isaiah. Sir, I don't know how to make this right. What I did, what I said. You already started, Isaiah said. You brought her here. You gave her answers. You chose to face your mistake instead of running from it. That's how you make it right. One choice at a time. Reed nodded, his face set with new determination. I'll do better. See that you do. The Honda pulled away, disappeared into the desert heat shimmer. Isaiah stood at the gate long after it was gone, feeling lighter somehow, as if 50 years of weight had finally begun to shift. General Whitmore approached him quietly. Commander Freeman, that offer still stands. We need you here. These soldiers need what you have to teach them. Isaiah turned to face her, saw genuine respect in her eyes, saw the entire base watching, waiting for his answer. All right, he said finally. I'll do it, but on my terms. I don't wear a uniform. I don't take orders. And if I see something that needs changing, I change it. No committee review, no chain of command. My word is final. Whitmore extended her hand. Deal. They shook, and Isaiah Freeman rejoined the war he thought he'd left behind. But this time, he wasn't fighting enemies across an ocean. He was fighting the ones that lived inside his own military, his own country, his own soul. And this time, he wasn't going to lose. 3 weeks later, Isaiah Freeman stood in front of 42 of America's most elite operators and asked them a question nobody had prepared them for. How many of you have killed someone? Every hand went up. No hesitation. These were warriors who'd seen combat, who'd pulled triggers when it mattered, who'd done what their country asked without flinching. Isaiah nodded slowly. Now keep your hand up if you remember their faces. Half the hands dropped immediately, then a few more, then more still, until only 7 remained raised, belonging to operators whose eyes held something the others hadn't learned yet, something that looked like permanent damage. Those of you with your hands still up, Isaiah said quietly, come see me after class. The rest of you ask yourself why you don't remember, because that answer matters more than you think. Captain Evans watched from the back of the room, arms crossed, face unreadable. 3 weeks of Isaiah's teaching had transformed the base in ways the official leadership hadn't anticipated. Operators who'd strutted through the facility with unearned confidence now moved differently, quieter, more thoughtful, like they'd been shown something about themselves they hadn't wanted to see. Lieutenant Reed sat in the front row, taking notes with the intensity of a man trying to rebuild himself from scratch. His team command hadn't been restored yet, probably wouldn't be for months. But he showed up to every training session, asked questions that revealed genuine self-examination, stayed late to help Isaiah set up equipment or file reports. You're wondering if this works, Isaiah said, addressing the group. If talking about feelings and facing uncomfortable truths actually makes you better warriors, some of you think it's soft, weak, not what you signed up for. A Marine Force recon sergeant named Dawson shifted uncomfortably. He'd been the most resistant to Isaiah's methods, the most vocal about preferring traditional training. Sergeant Dawson, Isaiah said, tell everyone what happened on your last deployment. Dawson's jaw tightened. Sir, that's classified. The operation is classified. What I'm asking about isn't. Tell them what happened after the operation. The room went silent, waiting. Dawson's voice came out rough. I put my weapon in my mouth. Sat in my barracks with my finger on the trigger for 3 hours. Didn't pull it because my daughter called. She was 6. Wanted to tell me about losing her first tooth. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. That saved your life? Isaiah asked. Temporarily. You still think about it. The weight of the weapon. How easy it would be. Dawson's eyes glistened. Every day. Isaiah moved closer to him, his voice gentle. That's not weakness, Sergeant. That's the cost of doing this work. The real cost. Not the action movie version where heroes walk away from explosions and never look back. The actual human cost of taking lives, seeing death, carrying choices that haunt you forever. He turned back to the full assembly. Last year, 23 active-duty special operators took their own lives. 23 warriors who survived enemy fire, survived impossible odds, survived everything the battlefield threw at them, and couldn't survive coming home. Why? Because we train you to be hard, to push through pain, to never quit, to embrace the suck. But we don't train you to be human afterward. We don't teach you how to put down the weapon and pick up your child, how to stop scanning for threats when you're at the grocery store, how to sleep without seeing faces you can't forget. Private Ramirez raised her hand. Sir, how do we balance it? Being hard enough to do the job, but soft enough to live afterward. You don't balance it, Isaiah said. You integrate it. You accept that the person who can kill efficiently and the person who cries at their daughter's dance recital are both you, both real, both necessary. The moment you think you have to choose between them is the moment you start dying inside. An Air Force PJ named Chen spoke up. My therapist says something similar, but every time I talk about needing help, guys look at me like I'm broken. Then those guys are idiots, Isaiah said bluntly. And you should tell them I said so. Seeking help isn't admission of weakness. It's recognition that you're human, that you have limits, that pushing past those limits without support doesn't make you strong, it makes you stupid. Dawson laughed sharp and surprised. Others joined in the tension, breaking slightly. Here's what nobody tells you, Isaiah continued. The enemy isn't just overseas, it's in your head. It's the voice that says you're not good enough, not hard enough, not warrior enough. It's the pride that stops you from asking for help. It's the shame that makes you hide your struggles. That enemy kills more operators than bullets do, and we've been losing that war for decades because we're too stubborn to admit it exists. General Whitmore entered the room, quietly took a position near the door. She'd been monitoring Isaiah's sessions, closely fielding complaints from old guard officers who thought his approach was too soft, too psychological, not military enough. But the results spoke for themselves. Disciplinary incidents down 40%, training performance up, and not a single suicide attempt in 3 weeks, which was statistically significant given the base's history. Isaiah saw her enter, nodded. Acknowledgement continued without breaking stride. I'm going to tell you about the worst decision I ever made. Not the one with Tommy Porter, though that's a close second. This one happened in 1970. We captured a North Vietnamese officer during a raid. Young guy, maybe 25. Spoke perfect English. Educated. Probably from a good family. The room leaned in, hungry for story. Our orders were to extract information by any means necessary. And for 3 days I did things I will never speak about out loud. Things that violated every principle I'd been raised with. Things that made me less human. And you know what? He never broke. Never gave us anything useful. We eventually had to release him because keeping him was too risky. Isaiah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I saw him again. 5 years later. I was back in the States working construction in Texas. He walked into the site office to submit a bid for electrical work. He'd immigrated after the war started, a business built a life. He recognized me immediately. The tension was unbearable. He asked if we could talk. I thought he was going to threaten me, sue me, expose me. Instead, he bought me coffee and told me he understood. That war makes monsters of everyone. That he'd done things to American prisoners that haunted him too. That maybe the only way to survive what we'd done was to acknowledge it. Except we couldn't undo it and spend the rest of our lives trying to be better. Isaiah looked around the room at faces frozen between horror and understanding. His name was Nguyen Van Tan. He became one of my closest friends. Died 2 years ago. Cancer. I spoke at his funeral. Told his children that their father taught me more about honor than any commanding officer ever did. That he saved my life by showing me how to forgive myself. Corporal Morrison, who'd followed Isaiah weeks ago to apologize, spoke up. Sir, how do you forgive yourself for unforgivable things? You don't, Isaiah said simply. You just learn to carry it better. You find people who understand. You do good work that partially offsets the bad. You accept that redemption isn't a destination, it's a direction. And some days you walk toward it. Some days you crawl. Some days you backslide. But as long as you keep trying, you're not lost. Lieutenant Reed's hand shot up. What if the people you hurt can't forgive you? What if they shouldn't? Isaiah looked directly at him. Then you accept that. You don't get to demand forgiveness. You don't get to center your guilt and make them responsible for absolving you. You just do better. You change. You ensure that the person you hurt was the last person you hurt that way. That's all you can control. Reed nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. General Whitmore chose that moment to step forward. Commander Freeman, I need to borrow you for a moment. Isaiah nodded to the assembly. Take 15. When you come back, we're doing live scenario training. I'm going to put you in impossible situations and watch how you handle them. Should be fun. Groans and nervous laughter followed him out. In the hallway, Whitmore's expression was grim. We have a problem. What kind? The kind that involves a senator, a journalist, and questions about why we have an uncredentialed civilian running training for classified operations. Isaiah felt his stomach drop. Someone complained. Multiple someones. Old guard. Officers who think you're making their people soft. They've gone over my head to the Pentagon. There's going to be an investigation. Then I'll leave. No need to make this your problem. Whitmore's eyes flashed. Like hell you will. You've done more for this base in 3 weeks than most trainers do in 3 years. I'm not losing you because some dinosaurs can't handle evolution. General, I appreciate the support, but I'm not worth a political battle. That's not your call. Whitmore pulled out her phone, showed him an email chain. Look at this. It's from Sergeant Dawson. He sent it to his entire chain of command this morning. Isaiah read the message. It was short, blunt, powerful. Dawson explaining how Isaiah's training had given him permission to seek help. How for the first time in 2 years he'd slept through the night without nightmares. How he'd called the suicide prevention hotline and scheduled therapy. How he'd told his daughter he loved her and meant it for the first time since he couldn't remember when. There are 43 more emails like that, Whitmore said, from operators across all branches, thanking you, crediting you with saving their lives or careers or marriages. That's the kind of impact you don't walk away from. Isaiah handed back the phone. Those senators will still shut this down. Not if we give them a reason not to. Whitmore's voice took on a strategic edge. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to formalize your position, give you an official title proper clearance documentation that makes you untouchable. We're going to create a new program, Warrior Resilience Integration, and put you in charge. I don't want to be in charge of anything. Too bad. You're the only person qualified for this. And more importantly, you're the only person these operators trust. They've been lied to by their leadership, failed by their support systems, abandoned by their institutions. But they trust you because you've been where they are. You carry what they carry. You don't bullshit them. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. This is going to make me a target. You're already a target. Might as well make it official. He thought about Tommy Porter, about Martha's words, about the promise he'd made to honor the dead by serving the living. All right, Isaiah said, but I want full autonomy. No interference from officers who think they know better. No watering down the curriculum to make it more palatable. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Done. Whitmore extended her hand. Welcome to the official military establishment, Commander Freeman. They shook, and Isaiah wondered if he'd just made a deal with the devil or taken a step towards something that might actually matter. Back in the training room, the operators had reassembled. Isaiah walked in to find them not in their seats, but standing in a loose circle, talking quietly among themselves. The energy was different, less guarded, more open. Reed was showing Chen a photo of his daughter. Dawson was talking to Morrison about therapy resources. Ramirez was asking Torres about dealing with imposter syndrome as a woman in special operations. They looked up when Isaiah entered and something passed between them. Not quite trust, that would take longer, but the beginning of it. The recognition that this man, this legend, in an orange polo shirt, understood them in ways their official leadership never would. All right, Isaiah said. Scenario time. I'm going to describe a situation. You're going to tell me what you do. There are no right answers, only honest ones. He moved to the front of the room. You're on deployment. 6 months in. Your team is solid, mission success rate is perfect, morale is high. Then you get news from home. Your spouse is leaving you, taking the kids. You have 3 days until your next operation, a high-risk raid that requires perfect mental focus. Do you tell your commanding officer? Do you ask to be pulled from the mission, or do you push through and hope you can compartmentalize? The room went silent. Finally, Reed spoke. I'd push through. Mission comes first. Why? Isaiah asked. Because that's what we do. We set aside personal problems and focus on the job. Okay, you push through. During the breach, your hesitation, just a half second of distraction, causes you to miss a hostile in the shadows. He shoots your teammate, non-fatal but serious. Your teammate survives but loses function in his right arm. His career is over. Now what? Reed's face went pale. That's the real scenario, Isaiah said. Not the neat training version where you can compartmentalize perfectly, the messy human version where your personal life bleeds into your professional life and people pay for your pride. Chen raised his hand. So what's the answer? We tell command and get pulled from every mission where we're not perfect. We spend more time on mental health evaluation than actual operations. The answer, Isaiah said, is that you build a culture where admitting you're struggling isn't career suicide, where your commanding officer asks, "Are you good?" and actually wants to hear the truth, where your team knows your limits and covers for you without judgment, where being human doesn't make you a liability. Captain Evans stepped forward from his position at the back. When I was Isaiah's second in command, he pulled me from a mission. I was furious. I'd trained for it, prepared for it, wanted it. He pulled me because my mother had just died and he could see I was a wreck, even though I said I was fine. Evans' voice roughened. I hated him for 3 days. Then I found out the mission went sideways. 2 men didn't come home. If I'd been there in the state I was in, I'd have been the third. Isaiah saved my life by seeing what I couldn't see in myself. Isaiah nodded. That's leadership, not the heroic version, the hard version. Sometimes taking care of your people means protecting them from themselves. Sometimes it means making unpopular decisions. Sometimes it means being hated temporarily so your people can survive permanently. Dawson stood up. Sir, I need to say something. Go ahead. 3 weeks ago, I thought you were full of shit. Thought all this touchy-feely stuff was going to get people killed. Thought real warriors didn't need therapy and emotional check-ins. I was wrong. I was so goddamn wrong. His voice cracked. I've been dying slowly for 2 years, pretending I was fine, pretending the nightmares were normal, pretending that sitting in my truck with a pistol every night was just how things were now. But you gave me permission to not be fine. You showed me that admitting I was struggling didn't make me weak, it made me smart enough to survive. He looked around at his fellow operators. I'm in therapy now. I'm on medication. I'm doing EMDR for PTSD. And you know what? I'm a better operator now than I was before, because I'm not carrying all that weight alone anymore, because I can focus on the mission instead of using the mission to avoid dealing with my life. The room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that comes from witnessing courage that has nothing to do with combat. Isaiah felt something in his chest crack open. This was why he'd come back. This moment, these warriors finding the strength to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be human. General Whitmore's voice came from the doorway. I hate to interrupt, but Commander Freeman, we have visitors. Isaiah turned to see 3 people entering the room. 2 men in suits that screamed federal government, and behind them a woman he recognized immediately. Martha Porter. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane she hadn't needed 3 weeks ago, but her eyes were bright and fierce. Mrs. Porter, Isaiah said, confused. What are you doing here? Saving your stubborn ass, Martha said. These gentlemen are from the Senate Armed Services Committee. They've been asking questions about you, about whether you're qualified to train military personnel, about whether your methods are appropriate. The 2 suits stepped forward. The older one, gray-haired and professional, spoke first. Commander Freeman, I'm Senator Mitchell's Chief of Staff. We've been conducting an investigation into the training protocols at this facility. Isaiah's hands clenched. And Mrs. Porter called the senator personally, told him about her son, about you, about what your teaching meant to Tommy and what it could mean to this generation. She also provided letters from 47 Gold Star families who lost children in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all endorsing your program. The younger aide pulled out a folder. We've also reviewed the data from this base. Suicide prevention calls up 300%. Therapy utilization up 500%. And crucially, mission performance hasn't decreased, it's increased. Operators who are addressing their mental health are sharper, more focused, more effective. Isaiah looked at Martha. You did this. Damn right I did, Martha said. You think I let my son die so you could waste your second chance. You made me a promise, Isaiah Freeman. You promised to honor Tommy by teaching others. I'm here to make sure you keep it. The Chief of Staff cleared his throat. Commander, the Senator wants to expand your program. Make it mandatory across all special operations units. You'd need to train other instructors, develop curriculum, create a system that can scale. It's a lot of work, but it could change everything. Isaiah felt Evans's hand on his shoulder. felt the weight of every operator in that room watching him, felt Tommy Porter's ghost standing beside him 19 forever, waiting to see if his death would finally mean something beyond grief. "I'm 75 years old," Isaiah said. "I don't know how much time I have left." "Then let's not waste it," Martha said firmly. "Tommy didn't get time. You did. Use it." Isaiah looked around the room at faces that had transformed from cocky and closed to open and hopeful. At Reed, who'd gone from arrogant bully to humble student. At Dawson, who'd chosen life. At Ramirez, who carried her grandfather's legacy forward. At all of them, these warriors who'd learned to kill, but were now learning to live. "All right," Isaiah said. "I'm in." The room exploded. Operators on their feet applauding, shouting, some crying openly. Warriors who'd learned that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites, but partners. That admitting weakness took more courage than pretending to be invincible. General Whitmore stepped to the center of the chaos. "Stand at attention." Everyone snapped to position, the discipline ingrained despite the emotion. "Commander Freeman," Whitmore said formally, "on behalf of the United States military, I want to thank you for your service, past and present. Your methods have saved lives. Your honesty has opened doors we didn't know were closed. Your courage has given others permission to be courageous in ways that matter most." She pulled something from her pocket, a small black box. "This is long overdue, about 50 years overdue." She opened the box to reveal a Medal of Honor. Isaiah's breath caught. "General, I can't." "You can and you will," Whitmore said. "This was recommended in 1972 for Operation Crimson Tiger. It was denied because the operation was classified. That classification has been lifted. The recommendation has been approved. And while we can't give you back the recognition you deserved 50 years ago, we can give you this now." She pinned the medal to his orange polo shirt, the highest military honor resting against cheap cotton, and somehow that made it more meaningful. Not awarded in a formal ceremony with dignitaries and protocol, but here in a training room surrounded by the warriors he was helping to heal. "Commander Isaiah Freeman," Whitmore said, her voice thick with emotion. "We see you. We honor you. We learn from you. Thank you." The salutes came without order, every hand rising, every operator honoring not just the medal, but the man wearing it, the ghost of Da Nang finally visible after decades in shadow. Isaiah returned the salute, tears streaming down his face, and felt Tommy Porter's ghost finally smile. Martha moved beside him, took his hand. "He'd be proud," she whispered. "So proud." "I hope so," Isaiah said. "God, I hope so." Outside, the desert sun beat down on a military base that would never be quite the same. Inside, warriors learned the hardest lesson of all, that survival wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about knowing how to put yourself back together when you inevitably shattered. And Isaiah Freeman, 75 years old, Medal of Honor, recipient, former ghost, stood at the center of it all and finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place, to a purpose. The war wasn't over. It would never be over. But for the first time in 50 years, Isaiah believed they might actually win it. The medal felt heavier than it should. Isaiah touched it through his shirt pocket as he walked across the base 6 months later, still not quite believing it was real. Still not quite believing any of this was real. The Warrior Resilience Integration Program had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. What started as 42 operators in a single training room had expanded to 300 personnel across 5 bases. Isaiah spent his days traveling between facilities, training instructors, reviewing curriculum, and having conversations that most military leadership still found uncomfortable. But the numbers didn't lie. Suicide rates down 67% across participating units. Therapy utilization up 800%. And most importantly, operators were coming forward before they hit crisis. They were asking for help when they first felt themselves slipping, instead of waiting until they were standing on the edge. Captain Evans found him near the obstacle course where a new class was running drills. "You're late for the briefing." Isaiah checked his watch. "I'm exactly on time." "Yeah, but Whitmore likes people 5 minutes early. Says it shows respect." "I showed respect by agreeing to wear actual shoes instead of my sandals." That's the compromise. Evans laughed. The sound came easier now than it had 6 months ago, like something had loosened in him too. She's going to promote you to full colonel if you're not careful. Can't promote a civilian. She'll find a way. Trust me. They walked together toward the command building, passing clusters of operators in various stages of training. Isaiah noticed how many of them made eye contact, now nodded greetings. Some even stopped to ask questions. 6 months ago, most of them had looked through him like he was invisible. You hear about Reed? Evans asked. Isaiah had heard. Lieutenant Marcus Reed had completed his leadership remediation program 3 weeks ahead of schedule. He'd voluntarily extended it another month, asking for additional training in cultural sensitivity and bias recognition. His evaluation reports were exceptional. His team wanted him back. I heard, Isaiah said. What's your read on him? Evans was quiet for a moment. I think he's genuine. I think getting his ass handed to him was the best thing that ever happened to his career. But I also think he's terrified of screwing up again. Fear isn't always bad. Keeps you honest. It can also paralyze you. Isaiah nodded. That's why I want to talk to him. See where his head's at before Whitmore makes the final call on his reinstatement. They reached the command building where General Whitmore was waiting in her office, surrounded by reports and coffee cups that suggested she'd been there since before dawn. She looked up when they entered, her face showing the particular exhaustion of someone carrying too much responsibility. Commander, she said, we have a situation. Isaiah had learned that situation in military speak could mean anything from minor inconvenience to absolute catastrophe. What kind? The kind involving your friend Senator Mitchell. Isaiah's stomach tightened. Senator Mitchell had been instrumental in legitimizing the program, securing funding, pushing back against critics who thought teaching operators about emotions was a waste of resources. If something had happened to that support, he wants to send his son to you, Whitmore said. Isaiah blinked. Come again. His son, Marine Captain, 3 combat tours, Silver Star, and according to the senator, completely falling apart. Won't talk to therapists, won't talk to chaplains, won't talk to anyone except the bottle. Mitchell thinks you're his last chance. I'm not a therapist, Isaiah said. I'm just someone who tells the truth about what this life costs. Maybe that's exactly what he needs. Whitmore pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. Captain David Mitchell, 29 years old, brilliant tactician, natural leader, and drowning in PTSD so severe his psychiatrist thinks he's a suicide risk. Isaiah opened the file, saw a young man who looked disturbingly familiar. Same cocky confidence in the earlier photos. Same haunted emptiness in the recent ones. Same trajectory as Sergeant Dawson, Lieutenant Reed. Countless others who'd learned how to fight, but not how to stop fighting. When's he arriving? Isaiah asked. He's not, Whitmore said. He refused the order, told his father to stop trying to fix him, said he'd rather die than admit he needs help. The words hung in the air like smoke. Evans cursed softly. So we're supposed to, what stage in intervention? We're supposed to save his life, Whitmore said flatly. By any means necessary. Commander, I know this isn't what you signed up for, but if anyone can reach him, it's you. Isaiah looked at the photo of David Mitchell, saw Tommy Porter's face superimposed over it, saw every young warrior who'd died because they were too proud or too scared or too broken to ask for help. Where is he? Virginia, living in his apartment. Hasn't reported for duty in 3 weeks. He's technically AWOL, but his father's been running interference. That's going to stop working soon, Evans said. Whitmore nodded. Which is why we need to move fast. Commander, I'm authorizing you to go to Virginia. Talk to him. Do whatever you need to do. Isaiah closed the file. I'll need Reed. Both Whitmore and Evans stared at him. Reed's not cleared for field work, Whitmore said. He's still in remediation. Exactly. He's been where Mitchell is. Pride denial, self-destruction. If anyone can speak to that from personal experience, it's Reed. Besides, it'll be good for him. Chance to help someone else instead of just fixing himself. Whitmore considered this. You're sure about this? No, but I'm sure we don't have better options. She made a decision with the speed that had earned her those stars. Fine. You and Reed leave in 2 hours. Bring him back alive. Isaiah and Reed sat in uncomfortable silence on the military transport plane, the engine noise making conversation difficult but not impossible. Reed had said exactly 7 words since they'd boarded, "Sir, I won't let you down." Now, 3 hours into the flight, Isaiah decided silence had lasted long enough. "Tell me about the worst thing you ever did," Isaiah said. Reed's head snapped up. "Sir, the worst thing, the thing that keeps you up at night, the thing you've never told anyone." Reed's face went pale. "Why?" "Because Mitchell's going to test you. He's going to look for any sign of judgment, any hint that you think you're better than him. And if he finds it, he'll shut down completely. So I need to know if you can sit with someone else's worst without flinching, which means I need to know your worst first." Reed was quiet for so long Isaiah thought he wasn't going to answer. Then words started coming slow and painful, like pulling glass from a wound. "Afghanistan, 2019. We had intel on a high-value target hiding in a compound. My team breached. I cleared the first room, saw movement fired. 2 shots, center mass, perfect execution." His voice cracked. "It was a kid, 12 years old. He'd heard us coming, grabbed a stick to defend his family. I saw a weapon and I fired. By the time I realized it wasn't a weapon, he was already dead." Isaiah said nothing, just listened. "The investigation cleared me. Called it justified under ROE. Said in low-light conditions with hostile intent, the shooting was reasonable. My command said I did everything right. But that kid's mother, she was in the next room. She ran in and just screamed. Didn't attack me, didn't curse me, just held her son and screamed like the world was ending." Reed wiped his eyes roughly. "I dream about her every night. That scream. I wake up hearing it. Sometimes I'm at the grocery store and I hear a kid laugh, and for a second I forget he's dead, and then I remember, and it's like killing him again every single day." "You told anyone this?" Isaiah asked quietly. "My therapist. That's it. Everyone else just sees the cleared investigation and assumes I'm fine with it." "Are you fine with it?" "No." Reed's voice was raw. "I'll never be fine with it. But I'm learning to live with not being fine. Learning that carrying it doesn't mean I'm broken. It means I'm human." Isaiah nodded slowly. "That's what you're going to tell Mitchell? Not that it gets better. Not that time heals all wounds, but that you can survive carrying unbearable weight if you're not carrying it alone." Reed looked at him with something like hope. "You think he'll listen?" "I think he'll either listen or he'll die. Those are the only 2 options left." They landed in Virginia just after sunset. Senator Mitchell had provided an address and a key, but refused to come himself. "He doesn't want to see me right now," the senator had said over the phone, his voice thick with fear and frustration. "Just bring my son home." The apartment building was nicer than Isaiah expected. Clean, well-maintained, the kind of place successful young professionals lived. Nothing about it suggested crisis or collapse. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. Isaiah could feel Reed's tension radiating like heat. "Remember," Isaiah said, "we're not here to fix him. We're here to offer him a choice. What if he doesn't want the choice? Then we make him take it anyway." Isaiah knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Captain Mitchell, my name is Isaiah Freeman. Your father sent me. I'm coming in." He used the key. The door swung open on an apartment that had clearly been nice once but had descended into chaos. Empty bottles everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, curtains drawn against the daylight, the smell of unwashed human and rotting food. David Mitchell sat on the couch in the darkness wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, a pistol on the coffee table in front of him. He didn't look up when they entered. "Get out," he said. His voice was hoarse, damaged. "Can't do that," Isaiah said. He moved into the room, slowly making no sudden movements. Reed stayed near the door, blocking the exit. "I said get out." Mitchell's hand moved toward the pistol. "You're going to shoot me?" Isaiah asked. "In front of a witness. That's a court-martial and prison time. Seems like a lot of paperwork. Mitchell's hand stopped. You think this is funny? I think you're sitting in the dark with a loaded weapon feeling sorry for yourself when there are people who'd give anything to have the choices you have right now. Mitchell's head snapped up, rage flooding his face. You don't know anything about my choices. I know you're alive, which means you still have them. Isaiah sat down in a chair across from the couch, deliberately putting himself between Mitchell and the gun. Your father thinks I can save you. He's wrong. Only person who can save you is you. I'm just here to tell you it's possible. Nothing's possible. Mitchell's voice broke. You don't understand. The things I've done, the things I've seen, I can't come back from that. Reed stepped forward. 3 months ago, I stood in a command tent and humiliated a 75-year-old veteran because he didn't look like what I thought a warrior should look like. I called him old man, told him to go to a VFW hall because it served his kind. I was so sure of myself, so certain I knew everything. Mitchell looked at him, confusion cutting through the despair. Turns out that old man was a legend, Reed continued. A Medal of Honor recipient who'd forgotten more about warfare than I'll ever know. I destroyed my career in 30 seconds because I was too arrogant to recognize greatness when it was standing right in front of me. He moved closer. I wanted to die after that, seriously considered it. Because if I could be that wrong about something so important, what else was I wrong about? Maybe I wasn't the leader I thought I was. Maybe I was just a bully with a trident. Maybe everyone who'd ever believed in me was wrong. So what stopped you? Mitchell asked, his voice barely audible. Him. Reed pointed at Isaiah. He told me that mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does. That being wrong doesn't make you worthless, it makes you human. And that the bravest thing I could do was face what I'd done and choose to be better. Isaiah picked up the thread. You're sitting here thinking you're the only one carrying impossible weight. But Captain, every person in my program is carrying something. Some killed civilians in bad shoots. Some lost teammates to their mistakes. Some did things in the name of national security that violate every moral principle they were raised with. They're all carrying unbearable weight. Then how do they survive it? Mitchell's voice was desperate now, the anger cracking to reveal the fear underneath. They stop trying to carry it alone, Isaiah said simply. They find people who understand. They talk about it with therapists who won't judge them. They accept that healing isn't linear. Some days you're better, some days you backslide. But as long as you keep choosing life, you're winning. Mitchell looked at the gun on the table. What if I don't want to keep choosing life? What if I'm tired of fighting? Then you rest, Isaiah said. You don't have to fight right now, you just have to breathe. Just make it to tomorrow. Then tomorrow you make it to the next day. Eventually those days add up to something that looks like a life worth living. You don't understand what I've done. Try me. Mitchell's resistance finally broke. Words came pouring out fast and ugly and true. He talked about a mission that went wrong, about civilians caught in crossfire, about a call he'd made that saved his team but killed innocents, about the investigation that cleared him legally but not morally, about the Marine who'd filmed it, whose conscience couldn't handle the cover-up, who'd sent the footage to a journalist before killing himself. It's going to come out, Mitchell said. The footage, the story, all of it. My father's been trying to suppress it, but it's going to break. And when it does, I won't just be court-martialed. I'll be the face of American war crimes, the poster boy for everything wrong with how we fight. Isaiah sat with that for a moment. This was worse than he'd thought. Not just personal trauma, but a legitimate crisis that could destroy Mitchell's life and career. What actually happened? Isaiah asked. Not the version you've been telling yourself. The truth. Mitchell's hands shook. We were taking fire from a building. Heavy fire. My team was pinned down. I called in air support. The building got leveled. Turned out there were families inside. 12 civilians dead, 7 of them children. Did you know they were there? Intel said the building was clear. We've been watching it for days. No indication of civilian presence. Was the intel wrong or did something change? Mitchell looked up, something like hope flickering. The families moved in that morning. We didn't know. Couldn't have known. But you blame yourself anyway, Isaiah said. Because you made the call. Because your name's on the after-action report. Because someone has to carry the weight and you're the one with the most convenient shoulders. Those kids are still dead. My fault or not, they're dead because of a decision I made. Isaiah leaned forward. You're right. They're dead. And nothing you do, not therapy, not redemption, not even ending your own life will bring them back. So the question isn't, how do you make it right? The question is, how do you honor their memory by living in a way that acknowledges their loss without being consumed by it? Reed sat down next to Mitchell. I killed a 12-year-old kid in Afghanistan. Shot him in his own home. It was ruled justified, but that doesn't change the fact that I killed a child. I'll carry that forever. But I'm learning that carrying it doesn't mean drowning in it. Mitchell looked between them, these two men who understood his darkness because they lived in their own. What if I can't learn that? Then we teach you, Isaiah said. That's what we do. We take warriors who think they're broken beyond repair, and we show them how to put the pieces back together in a way that honors both who they were and who they're becoming. What if the scandal breaks? What if I lose everything? Then you lose everything, Isaiah said bluntly. And you survive it. You build something new. You find purpose outside of rank and uniform. Plenty of veterans have done it. You're not special in your suffering, Mitchell. You're just suffering. The words were harsh, but they landed with the force of truth. Mitchell's face crumpled, and he started crying great, heaving sobs that sounded like they were tearing him apart from the inside. Isaiah moved to sit beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. Reed did the same on the other side. They sat there in that dark apartment with a broken Marine between them, and just let him cry. No platitudes, no promises that everything would be okay. Just presence. Just the silent message that he wasn't alone in this. Eventually, the crying stopped. Mitchell wiped his face, looked at them with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in months. What happens now? He asked. Now we get you help, Isaiah said. Real help. Intensive therapy, trauma processing, probably inpatient treatment for a while. It's going to be hard. Harder than anything you've done in combat. But on the other side of it is a life worth living. And the footage, the scandal. Isaiah was quiet for a moment. I can't fix that. Nobody can. But I can tell you this, the way through shame isn't hiding from it. It's facing it directly. Owning your part in what happened, while also acknowledging the systems that put you in that position. Being honest about the cost of war in a way that most military leadership isn't brave enough to be. They'll destroy me for that. Maybe. Or maybe you'll become the voice that actually changes things, the officer who refuses to pretend that war is clean, who speaks truth about the impossible choices you're asked to make and the trauma that follows, who fights for better rules of engagement, better intelligence, better support for operators dealing with moral injury. Reed nodded. You could be the person who prevents the next Captain Mitchell from sitting in a dark apartment with a gun on the table. Mitchell looked at the pistol, then reached out and pushed it away from him. The gesture was small but significant, a choice made in the direction of life instead of death. Okay, he said quietly. I'll go with you. I'll try. That's all we're asking, Isaiah said. Just try, keep trying, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They got Mitchell cleaned up, packed a bag called Senator Mitchell to tell him his son was coming home. The senator's relief was audible, even through the phone. On the flight back, Mitchell sat between Isaiah and Reed, looking exhausted, but marginally more human than he had 6 hours ago. Can I ask you something? Mitchell said to Isaiah. Go ahead. Why do you do this? You're 75 years old, Medal of Honor recipient. You could be living comfortably enjoying retirement. Instead, you're flying across the country to talk suicidal Marines off the ledge. Why? Isaiah thought about Tommy Porter, about Martha, about the promise he'd made and the debt he'd been paying for 50 years. Because someone has to, he said simply. Because if not me, then who? Because I survived when better men didn't, and the only way to honor that is to make sure fewer people have to survive alone. Mitchell nodded slowly, processing. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and took Isaiah's hand, squeezed it hard. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." "I don't give up on warriors," Isaiah said. "Ever. That's the deal." 6 months later, Isaiah stood in front of Congress testifying about the Warrior Resilience Integration Program. The committee room was packed with politicians, journalists, military brass, and families who'd lost loved ones to suicide. He wore his Medal of Honor with his orange polo shirt, a deliberate choice that made some of the old guard uncomfortable but sent exactly the message he wanted. You didn't have to fit their image of what a hero looked like to be one. "The statistics speak for themselves," Isaiah said, his voice steady despite his age. "Since implementing this program across 18 military installations, we've seen suicide rates drop 73%. Therapy utilization up 1,000%. Mission readiness and performance haven't decreased, they've improved. Because operators who are mentally healthy are more effective operators." Senator Mitchell sat on the committee, his face showing both professional interest and personal gratitude. His son David sat in the gallery 6 months into recovery, looking fragile but alive. "But numbers don't tell the whole story," Isaiah continued. "The real story is in the warriors who came forward before they hit crisis. The team leaders who learned to check on their people's mental health with the same rigor they check equipment. The culture shift from mental health is weakness to mental health is mission critical." A senator from Oklahoma raised his hand. "Commander Freeman, some critics say your program is making our military soft. That teaching operators about emotions and therapy is incompatible with creating effective warriors. How do you respond?" Isaiah looked directly at him. "I'd say those critics don't know what they're talking about. The hardest thing a warrior can do isn't pulling a trigger, it's facing their own darkness afterward. It's choosing to keep living when every instinct says to stop. It's being honest about struggles in a culture that punishes honesty. That takes more courage than anything I did in Vietnam." He paused, letting that sink in. "You want soft? Soft is pretending our warriors are machines. Soft is ignoring PTSD until they're standing on a bridge. Soft is offering thoughts and prayers instead of actual mental health resources. My program isn't making warriors soft, it's making them sustainable. There's a difference." The room erupted in applause, not unanimous. Some of the old guard sat stone-faced, but enough to matter. After the testimony, Isaiah found himself surrounded by families. Gold Star mothers wanting to thank him for teaching lessons their sons never learned. Veterans wanting to share their stories. Active duty personnel asking how to get the program at their base. Lieutenant Reed appeared through the crowd, now wearing his team command insignia again. His reinstatement had been unanimous. His leadership reviews were exceptional. "Sir, there's someone who wants to meet you," Reed said. He led Isaiah to a quiet corner where a young black woman stood holding the hand of a 6-year-old girl. The woman looked familiar, but Isaiah couldn't place her. "Commander Freeman," she said. "I'm Sergeant Dawson's daughter. This is Lily, his granddaughter." Isaiah's breath caught. "How is he?" "Alive because of you. He's been in therapy for 8 months. He's rebuilding his relationship with me and with Lily. He's learning to be present. And he told me that if I ever saw you, I should say thank you, because you gave him permission to not be okay. And that permission saved his life." The little girl held out a drawing. "Grandpa said to give you this." Isaiah took it with shaking hands. It showed a man in an orange shirt holding the hand of a soldier. Above them, in a child's careful letters, "Heroes help heroes." Isaiah couldn't speak, could only hug this woman and her daughter and feel the weight of 50 years finally beginning to lift. That night, Isaiah sat in his hotel room looking at the Medal of Honor. Tommy Porter's face smiled at him from his memory, 19, forever proud. "We did it," Isaiah whispered to the ghost. "We kept the promise." His phone rang. It was Martha Porter. "I watched your testimony online," she said. "Tommy would have been so proud." "I hope so. I know so." Her voice was warm, certain. "You've saved more lives in the last year than you lost in the war. That's not redemption, Isaiah. That's transcendence." Isaiah felt something in his chest finally release. Not forgiveness, he wasn't sure he'd ever fully forgive himself, but acceptance. The recognition that he'd done what he could with what he had, that he'd honored the dead by serving the living. that his second chance had meant something. Thank you, Martha, for everything. Thank you for keeping your promise. Now get some rest. You've got another hearing tomorrow. Isaiah hung up and looked out at the Washington night. Somewhere out there, warriors were making the same impossible choices he'd made 50 years ago. Some would come home physically. All would come home changed. But now, thanks to the program he'd built, they'd come home to support instead of silence, to understanding instead of judgment, to a military that finally acknowledged that taking care of warriors meant more than equipment and tactics. It meant caring for their souls. He thought about Lieutenant Reed transformed from bully to teacher, about Captain Mitchell choosing life over death, about Sergeant Dawson learning to be a grandfather, about all the warriors he'd never meet who would benefit from lessons learned in blood and pain and hard-won wisdom. Isaiah Freeman picked up the drawing from Dawson's granddaughter, taped it to the mirror where he'd see it first thing every morning. A reminder that heroes help heroes, that the work was never done, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth doing. He was 75 years old, a Medal of Honor recipient, a legend who'd spent decades in shadow. And for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The war against silence, against shame, against the systems that broke warriors and then abandoned them. That war would continue long after Isaiah was gone. But he'd fought his part. He'd built something that would outlast him. He'd turned his grief into purpose and his guilt into grace. And Tommy Porter, wherever he was, finally rested easy, knowing his death had meant something after all. That the young officer who'd pushed him aside to save his life had spent the rest of his own life making sure fewer families would know the grief that Martha carried. That the ghost of Da Nang had finally stepped into the light and used his visibility to illuminate a path forward for everyone still walking in darkness. Isaiah Freeman closed his eyes, and for the first time in 50 years slept without nightmares. Because heroes help heroes, and he'd finally learned how to help himself by helping others. The circle was complete. The promise kept the work begun that would ripple forward through generations of warriors who would never know his name, but would benefit from his courage to speak truth about the cost of service and the necessity of care. This was the real mission, the one that mattered most. Not the wars we fight overseas, but the battles we wage for each other's survival when the shooting stops and the silence begins.